Good evening. I'll call tonight's meeting the Louisville City Council to order. We do have a quorum present. Okay. City Secretary, if you would start the agenda.
Okay. The first item on workshop is discussion of regular agenda items and consent agenda items.
Okay. Item 1. Item 2.
Mayor and council, items number 2 and number 3 need to be continued to the next meeting.
Okay. Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does anybody have a follow-up on number 3?
No, sir. We just need to be continued to the next meeting.
Okay. Now we're down to consent agenda 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Do you have anything to pull yet here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, regular hearings, item 8.
Mayor, I'd like to take the council into closed session for attorney-client
Right now?
discussion. We can do it now or at the time of the agenda items.
Let's do it now.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to go into closed session on item number 8. We're in closed session.
We're ready to
Okay.
go back into workshop session.
Okay. City Secretary. Now, number 8.
Yeah, we left off on item 8.
Yep.
For discussion of the items, so we'll start on item 9.
No, we just got to 8.
Yeah, just got to it.
So you want to read that one?
That was just workshop, so we just need to see if anybody has any other questions on the other items.
9 then.
Yes, sir.
Item 9. Item 10. Item 11.
I don't have a question on this one, but I just have a comment. I drove around this afternoon looking at the various addresses that were on our agenda this evening, and I drove past Polzer Elementary School, and frankly, I don't understand how anyone accepted the current pattern there at all. It's having to make a left turn into the school seems to be a really strange way to do that. But I know we were doing it at Mill Street too. But anyway, I think this is an excellent thing an excellent change.
And the city of Carrollton actually requested this particular change from us, so I think it will make a major impact.
Okay. Is that all you needed? We're to 11 now.
We're to number 12.
Okay, item 12.
So James will have a presentation on this item, Mayor, at a later time.
Okay. I'm going to say
James will have a presentation during the regular meeting.
okay. Item 13.
Mayor, would you like me to read the interview teams and the boards as we talk
Can you
about?
read those?
Absolutely. The interview teams and the boards that they'll be interviewing for will be Mayor Durham and Councilperson Gilmore. We'll do Park Board, Library Board, Community Development Block Grant Advisory Committee, and the Louisville 2025 Advisory Board. Councilperson Jones and Councilperson Green will do Animal Services Advisory Board, Zoning Board of Adjustment, Old Town Design Review Committee, Tax Increment Zone Number 1 Board of Directors, Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Number 2 Board of Directors. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer and Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson will do Arts Advisory Board, Planning and Zoning Commission, Louisville Parks and Library Development Corporation, Louisville Housing Finance Corporation, and Oil and Gas Advisory Board. And I will email all of council tomorrow so they know exactly which board they are doing.
Thank you. Item 14.
Mayor and Council, item 14 deals with utility disconnections. If you'll remember earlier, when you passed the emergency order, we suspended utility disconnections. With item 14, what we're asking you to do is put those disconnections back in place, but only once we have a payment plan process. We've never had a payment plan procedure under the ordinances, and so this change will certainly help us work through this COVID situation, but will also be a good tool for staff to use in the future when people have problems paying for their utility bill. The other interesting point on this one, we started out, we had about 1,100 delinquent accounts. Last week, Dave and the finance staff started calling people that are on the delinquent list. And what they told them was with the CARES funding, that the United Way is managing a utility assistance program. Right after that, Gary reached out to us and told us that the number of applications grew from 11 to over 90. So that's really impactful. People are reaching out and they are getting help through that CARES program. The delinquent accounts has dropped down to about 865 at this point. So Dave and his team will continue to work with people, but with passage of 14 and then with 15, you would be putting your utility disconnections back in place. But with all the notices, those disconnections wouldn't really start until August.
Do I have a motion?
Oh, Mayor, we're just doing discussion right now. We're just doing discussion and review.
Who do we have for discussion?
DB's done, Donna Barron's done, City Manager Barron's done, so we're ready to see if anyone has anything on 15.
Okay. Just call the next one up, whoever it is.
Okay. The mayor would like to know if anyone has any questions or comments on item 15.
I'm having trouble hearing.
Okay, awesome. There are no questions, Mayor.
Okay.
So we are ready to move on.
Okay.
Ready to move on to workshop agenda item B, the 2020 City Council Retreat Direction Revisited. The first item is a 2025 update.
Mayor and Council, we have Karen Walls with us tonight virtually, and she's going to walk you through the work that we have done on the 2025 plan and how we have changed our time frames because of the COVID situation. So Karen, I will turn it over to you. Do we have Karen out there?
Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. I was on mute. Thank you, Donna, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for a chance to update you this evening. I believe that I will, Julie, I think I'm sharing my screen, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. As Donna indicated, we have been working through the council retreat, as with your other items from retreat, looking at the best ways to move forward with the 2025 update. What I'd like to share with you this evening is our recommendations about how to update and move forward with revisiting that direction and with a schedule that accounts for some of the things that have happened in the last few months. At retreat, as you will remember, the council gave us direction on updating the vision statement for the 2025 plan. You updated the list of big and strategic moves, and you gave us direction on a number of the topics that had come up through all of the community outreach last fall and through the touch point events that happened in January. Just as a reminder, this is the updated vision statement with the changes especially related to connectivity that you directed at retreat. This is the updated list of the moves with 7 big moves now and 3 strategic moves as you had directed, and including in that big move number 6, the idea of place as well as identity. So creating the sense of place there. Since the retreat, obviously the delays have come about because of dealing with the COVID pandemic. That also has led to increased concerns about budget. and over the last month or two, increased awareness of issues related to inclusion and related to disparities within the community. So what we have tried to do is go back and look at each of the big and strategic moves and make sure that the direction that we're following as we develop the actual documents reflects the lessons that we've learned in those experiences. So we've been talking with the leadership at the staff level to get a sense of where we might make some of those changes. We expect that we'll need to look at action items based on your budget constraints, and we'll continue to work with the staff and the community to draft an actual updated document based on the direction that you can give us this evening. These are the proposed refinements that I'd like to share with you and propose this evening. Overall, the thing you'll see throughout each one of these moves is the idea of expanding the dialogue throughout all of the community, doing even more than we had been doing to try to make sure everyone is included, that we understand the experiences and the expectations and needs of people in all parts of the Louisville community. That also means broadening the options for engagement and involvement. Obviously more things that are online and virtual now than what we thought before. But we also think that in terms of the budget, some of the recommendations we have will focus more on some specific basic steps that we think can and should be done now, and maybe delay or defer some of the things that might involve a broader look. We think this will also help build in more resilience. So you'll see these themes through each one of the big moves that I'll discuss with you in a moment. So here's the list of the big moves. These are the 7 related to the direction that was in 2025. First one is green centerpiece. And for each of these, you'll see a couple of bullets that summarize the direction we received from you at retreat. In this case, you can see those 3 bullets of implementing the 10-minute walk to the park and connecting the community to Leela, providing for operations and enhancing the brand and visibility. When you see the directions from retreat highlighted in red, that means that in our view, those are even more important now than they were when we discussed them at retreat. So I wanted to emphasize those. You'll see those in several places as we go through the presentation. The proposed refinements that we're suggesting is less of a focus on just strictly the amount of usage, the number of visitors and so forth, but rather emphasizing more effort of connecting Leela and the green centerpiece to the Louisville residents who haven't engaged as much in the past. And so that kind of a trend is something that we think is a change in emphasis, but still very consistent with overall direction. That means more emphasis on trails, programs, and outreach with the entire community. With extending the green, again, you see several of the items here in red, things that we heard at retreat that are even more important now. That includes that 10-minute walk to the park, opportunities for small green spaces, and one of the council pitches about inclusive playgrounds where people of all abilities can play together. All of those we think are more important now even than they were then. The other items that would refine extending the green focus on health, on places for adequate exercise with adequate social distancing, and supporting healthy lifestyles within the community. In Old Town, the direction I think is still the same, but with a little more emphasis on Old Town as a center for resources and services in the events of crisis or other kinds of concerns. With diverse and thriving neighborhoods, we had quite a bit of discussion at retreat. And so you see this whole list of items which came from retreat, headed up by the need for a housing study to get a sense of the current situation, which even more importantly today, of course, than it was at the time. The refinements that we're suggesting here would continue to try to focus on ways to serve underserved communities, communities of color, and looking at things that might create barriers or divisions in the community and trying to break down those kinds of barriers. In terms of the big move for employment centers, one of the most important things that came out of the retreat direction is the idea of affordable housing being important to the city's economic vitality. And we talked about that at the time. This whole experience with COVID, I think, has really brought that point home. And so we would focus even more on that and look for incentives that might support workers or businesses that serve the community in times of crisis, and things that will help support healthy communities. In terms of identity, place, and communications, these continue to expand and focus on communications. There's more effort here as we see it now to enhance communications about the diverse communities that are part of Louisville, perhaps a little less emphasis on specific geographic focal points and more effort to engage the young and diverse residents of the city. In terms of sustainability, we looked at the list that you see here of items that create a holistic picture of sustainability. As you know, you heard part of a presentation from Mindy a few weeks ago about the Sustainability Action Plan, and you'll hear again about the details of that coming up at the July 20th meeting. So at this point, I just want to say that within sustainability, we see even greater focus on the items about equity and inclusiveness, and greater focus on health and wellness as part of that plan. Again, as you'll recall, the 2025 update will cover these things at a high level, and the details will be in the Sustainability Action Plan. The three strategic moves that you identified for us at Retreat in February, the values-driven city was the first one, and part of that was activity to increase the support for diversity in the community. We think that that should be even further strengthened. We think that the dialogues with the community of color, the listen, learn, lead, will help us to add even more focus and emphasis on values-driven city as part of the 2025 update. Data-driven city continues to be important. The data that we need to use to make decision-making has really been emphasized, I think, over the last few months. The refinement here would be to focus on some smaller area demographics to look at disparities more readily and to coordinate with medical providers to look at data related to health trends. The last of the moves is Connected City. And with this one, the couple of items that you see in red were also pitches from the council retreat about revising the complete streets policy and looking at pedestrian connections. Those again are even more important, we think, now than what we had identified at the time of the retreat. With all of those provisions, again, we're not trying to make specific draft recommendations to you tonight, but just to talk about the ways we see the direction being refined. We also would continue with the short-term steps that we discussed of connecting the 2025 update with the Sustainability Action Plan and with the library strategic plan, so we would maintain that coordination. The last thing I wanted to share with you is a revised timeline. And in a way, I want to start with the very bottom of the slide, which is that we believe that the way to accomplish this full update of 2025 would be to have it be the major focus of council retreat this coming February, with action immediately after that, so that we would have a complete document for you at the time of retreat. To do that, we would work, staff and I, through July through September to develop drafts of specific recommendations, meeting as we need to and as appropriate with the community, with boards and commissions and other organizations. We would expect to have a workshop with you in October to discuss those specifics. Then we would complete the actual final draft of the document during November and December. January would be an opportunity for the boards and commissions to weigh in. And then, as I say, in February, that the updated 2025 plan could be the major focus of retreat with your action on that plan immediately following. With that presentation, I'd be happy to answer any questions or any concerns or comments.
Any questions? Okay. City Manager, what's next?
Okay. So Mayor and Council, next we have discussion related to our water and sewer rates that we discussed at retreat. Chris Eckert is with us tonight. He is our consultant, has been for a number of years. He's with a company called NewGen, and he has been working with Dave, with the finance team as we move forward after retreat on the development of the inclining block structures. With that, Dave, I'll turn it over to you and Chris.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. Good evening, City Council. Just quick to add to what Ms. Barron had to say. This is a follow-up to the information you received for the February 2020 Council Retreat, where we introduced preliminary findings of the study, and we also introduced a little more information regarding the inclining block rate structure. Chris Eckroot is going to be presenting. We have a long history with NewGen. They developed the model we use in calculating the wholesale rates, and they have a strong familiarity with our utility system. So I think that made them a perfect fit to do these 2 phases of the rate studies. Chris is going to walk us through the results of the rate study and present the phase 1 rate plan implementation. We also have Public Services Director Keith Marvin, who will also provide a quick update of the water and the wastewater master plans that are expected to be completed late summer and early fall, and the impact that goes along with those regarding our capital plan. Before I turn it over to Chris, though, I'd like to share some good news that we recently received regarding the city's utility rating. The city just received from Fitch where our AAA rating was affirmed, and it included a stable outlook. This forward rating noted, among other things, the utility system's manageable debt levels. Chris will speak more to that during his PowerPoint presentation. So unless there's any other questions, I'll just turn it over to Chris.
Thank you very much, David. All right, hopefully everybody can see my screen at this point. Can someone confirm that that is live and moving there?
Yes, we can see it.
All right, fantastic. Well, again, my name is Chris Eckroot with NewGen Strategies and Solutions. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight, even in this virtual environment. I typically like to have this be more of a discussion, but this environment does make this a little more difficult. So hopefully I will address all of your questions as we go through this presentation. But in the event I don't, there will be plenty of time afterward to visit on anything that there may be. So again, our goal tonight is to accomplish basically 3 things. We want to first go back and recap the discussion that occurred at the council retreat in February of this year concerning water and wastewater rates. That's really just background information that will get us into both a discussion of the rate recommendation as well as a discussion of capital funding. When you look at the rate recommendation, it really is driven by the capital needs of the utilities. So we're going to spend time visiting about that before we get on to the recommendations for rate action in the coming fiscal year. So starting with a recap of the discussion from council retreat. Again, what is driving the current analysis? It really has to do with the anticipated annexation of the districts of Castle Hills. There's a need to begin examining the different rate structures between the city and the districts and starting to chart a path, a long-term path for bringing those rate structures together. As we go through that process, there are some goals that have been identified, which we are attempting to follow and incorporate in rate design. One of those is we want an equitable rate structure for the combined users when all is said and done. But at the same time, while we want equity in the rate structure, we want to ensure that we have sufficient cost recovery for the utility. Tonight, as you sit here as a city council, you also sit as the board of directors of a business. The water and sewer utility is a business-like activity of government. And so for a business to be successful, revenues must match or exceed expenses. That is the ultimate basic goal. So we have to make sure that we incorporate that in any recommendation. As we look at assigning cost responsibility, we come back to that equity discussion. But again, we're looking long-term support. Do we have the resources we need to equitably recover cost from customers? As David said, this is a 2-step process. Step 1 begins tonight, beginning to look at taking action on the city's rates for next fiscal year. Step 2 will come next fiscal year as we start to evaluate the combined structure, rate structure between the districts and the city, particularly looking at any justified rate differentials based on cost. So again, a little more background as we think about water and wastewater rates. I live and breathe this day to day, and I often forget that some people don't. So as we think about that, I just want to remind you, when you think about utility rates, it typically is a two-part rate. Part one of the rate that you'll hear me refer to tonight is a base or a fixed fee rate. That is a rate that a customer pays every month regardless of use. It can vary by meter size. Typically, when you're looking at water rates, the rate does increase based on the size of the meter. And sometimes there is a minimum allotment included in the bill. Part two of the bill is a volumetric charge. Again, that's a per unit charge based on actual use. We are going to be talking tonight about an inclining or conservation-based rate structure. That is specific to the volumetric rate, in that the rate increases as usage increases. That's what we talk about when we refer to an inclining or conservation-based rate structure. So starting again as part of the recap, just looking at what the city's rates are compared with Castle Hills or the district. And we're looking just at the fixed fee component of the bill. So you can see on the left-hand side of this chart, the city's current base water rates and the number of customers at each of those levels. Then you see the comparison to the district's current base rate and the monthly customers at those levels. While you can see that there are rates for 6, 8-inch, and 10-inch customers, there are very few customers at that level. Within the districts, there are no customers at those levels right now. Another element I want to point out is with the district rates, looking at the 1-inch and the 3/4 inch or less meter sizes, the districts have the same rate for those meters. We're going to talk about that again here in a minute. That's why I want to call that out. But as we think about the fixed portion of the water rate, you heard me say earlier that the fixed fee can increase as the meter size increases. Why is that? Well, there's cost causation there. Larger water meters place a higher instantaneous demand on the system. So for example, when a 3/4 inch meter is open fully, that places about 30 gallons per minute demand on the system. When a 2-inch meter is open fully, it places approximately 160 gallons per minute demand on the system. Because of those two different demand levels, that drives the infrastructure on the backside of the meter. So the city has to have greater levels of infrastructure for larger meter sizes. So it is an industry standard practice to price service to those larger meters at higher levels. Just looking at the calculation down below, again, using those demand factors that I just referred to, a 2-inch meter at 160 gallons per minute, if you divide that by the demand of a 3/4 inch meter, we can say that a 2-inch meter is roughly equivalent to 5.3 3/4 inch meters. So if we're pricing structures under this format, that 2-inch meter, because it can place 5.3 times the demand on the system, it should pay 5.3 times the 3/4 inch rate. That's what we refer to when we say meter equivalencies, and that's kind of how the math works on that. So with that being said, the chart that you see on the screen right now, you can see under AWWA capacity. That is the instantaneous demand in gallons per minute that can be placed on the system by a meter. Using that demand, you can see where it says AWWA equivalency factor. What that means is that according to these demands, that factor is what should drive the pricing for that meter size. Again, for example, a 2-inch meter should pay 5.33 times what a 3/4 inch meter pays. Under city current factors, you can see the current equivalency factors that the city is using. You also see what the districts are using on that far right-hand column. And I will point out the district factors do align for 1.5 inch meters up through the 2-inch a little bit. We start deviating at that 3-4 inch level. But what we are recommending is that as the city starts taking rate action, as you begin to look at this unified rate structure, we recommend that you phase in to those AWWA equivalencies over time. You're going to hear me say that many times tonight, over time. Why is that? We want to prevent rate shock. Anytime you are making changes in rate design, you send a signal to the customer and it impacts their bill. Anything we do like that, we want to do slowly because we want to minimize that rate shock. Another thing I'll point out, earlier you heard me talk about that the district sets the 1 inch and the 3/4 inch or less charges the same. So we've kept that the same within the rate plan tonight. Well, basically what that means is in recognition of that residential charge size or that residential design that the districts have, we want to maintain the same rate for all meters that are 1 inch and below. And you'll recall from the chart earlier, that's where most of the customers on the systems reside, is at that 1 inch and below level. But as we go to those equivalency factors, what that means is some rates may go up over time, but that may also require us to hold rates steady for some meter sizes until we reach that desired equivalency point. And so that's just something to notice as we move in. Some people will be impacted a little more heavily than others based on their meter size at any given time. So that's the fixed charge side. Let's go to the volumetric charge side on the water. Right now, within the city, you have a uniform or what we call a flat volumetric rate. For any usage that's 2,000 gallons or over, a customer on the system pays $3.26 per 1,000 gallons. This is a different structure than what the districts use. They use the inclining block or conservation-based rate structure. The inclining block or conservation-based structure is much more prevalent within the state. Again, water is a precious resource. We want to encourage its efficient use. The best way to do that is through proper pricing of the service and incorporating an inclining block structure such as you see on the screen. But as we move to that inclining block structure, obviously we have differences in our customer base. The chart you see on the screen, I believe this was shared during the council retreat. This is what we call a frequency distribution. You can begin to see where different customers on the system use water. And so this is just looking at all the customers, and you can see how the customers start falling off as you get to those larger levels. Right now, you only have about 4% of customers on average that get to 35,000 gallons. Between that 15 and 16,000 gallon block, only 10% of customers on average ever get to that level. That is different than how water is used in the districts. So here you can see how our incline kind of ticked up a little bit. You've got more customers that are getting to those higher levels of usage in the districts. Whereas for the city, you had about 10% at that 15 above level. Within the districts, it's 25%. So you've got users on the district side that use more water on average. And so they are a little more impacted by that inclining block structure as you look at that. So with that being said, as we think about an initial strategy for water rates and making adjustments to water rates going forward, it's our recommendation that at this time you maintain the 2,000 gallons in the minimum bill. What that means, so again, under the fixed charge, every customer basically gets 2,000 gallons of usage for what they pay in the fixed charge. It's important that we maintain that because we do have fixed income customers on our system. And many times those fixed income customers are also lower volume users. And so to protect those customers, we want to maintain the integrity of their rate design and maintain those volumes in the minimum bill. As I discussed, though, with the fixed charge, we do want to begin this phase-in process to those equivalency factors. On the volume side, we are recommending that you begin the process of moving towards a 4-block inclining block or conservation-based rate structure. When we get to the actual numbers, you're going to see that the initial change to that structure is not significant as far as the incline on the rates. Why is that? Again, we want to go slow. We want to prevent rate shock. We want to do this over time and minimize the overall impact we're having on our customers. And that's really the third bullet here. Again, you're going to hear me say that. We must avoid rate shock to our customers. We are recommending any initial adjustment in October of this year commensurate with the start of fiscal year 2021. So on the sewer rate side, you can see we've actually put all of the rates on the slide, both the fixed charge or the base charge, what we're calling here the minimum charge, and then the volumetric rate. Same structure, 2,000 gallons is included with that volumetric rate. The only real difference in terms of rate design is that the districts employ a specific rate for residential customers and a separate for commercial customers. Right now, the city has everyone under the same sewer rate structure. How sewer flow is billed is slightly different. Just to talk about that for a very brief minute, we don't typically meter sewer flow. We only meter water use into the system. So we use billed water use to determine sewer flow. That's done on a winter average. So we look at the water that's used in a residence in the winter, and we assume that is being returned to the sewer system and not being used in irrigation purposes. So when you see on the slide where it says winter average water use, that's what that means. And then on the commercial customer side, they are billed for actual water use. Many commercial customers employ a separate irrigation meter. That's why the billing method for commercial customers is typically different. So as far as sewer rate strategy, again, the fixed charge side, maintain that 2,000 gallons in the minimum bill. We are recommending that you look at creating a differential rate between residential and non-residential users. The quality of sewage is what really drives pricing for sewer, and we recognize that the quality of sewage being produced by commercial customers is different than residential customers. When you think about your commercial group, you have restaurants, you've got some possible manufacturing included there. So the quality of the sewage is different. So we are recommending that you create this differential reflective of that. On the volumetric side, that would carry through. That differential would continue both on the fixed and volumetric side. But again, looking to avoid rate shock as we move this direction. So that's a recap of the rates and the initial strategies that we've discussed and have been communicated. I do want to switch gears for just a minute and talk about the financial side. Again, as we look at adjusting rates, we have to make sure one of our goals and objectives was that we generate sufficient revenue to meet our needs. And so as we look at our needs, we have some significant capital funding needs coming in the future. And I'm going to turn it over here in just a minute to Keith, and he's going to kind of walk you through that. But before we get to that point, I do want to talk about how we fund capital. When you think about utilities, we have large projects that last many years. And so many times we use debt to fund those projects. But the debt rating agencies, so this is Fitch, S&P, and Moody's, they're beginning to place more emphasis on what they call financial leverage or the debt load of utilities. In April of this year, we saw Fitch come in and adopt new ratings criteria. And out of that ratings criteria, what they're anticipating is that utilities that have low leverage or low debt loads could see upgrades in their rating. Those that have a higher risk, higher leverage, higher debt load could see a reduced rating. Right now, the city is at the top. As David said before, you are a AAA rated city, and that is worth holding on to. Why is that worth holding on to? The higher the rating you get on your debt, the lower your borrowing cost. So the lower your long-term cost to customers. So as we look at that, how do we maintain that rating? One way we do that is to watch the level of debt that we maintain. David sent me a copy of your rating earlier, and I'm just going to read very briefly from that rating. It talks about that your net leverage or debt load has been stable. And the rating agencies right now, in support of that AAA rating, they're expecting that leverage to remain close to where it is right now. They're also saying that as they look at your CIP, it incorporates accelerated investment or higher levels of investment while maintaining manageable debt levels. So as you see on the screen at the bottom here, 63 million, that's the CIP right now before we look at the impact of the to be completed master plans. We need $63 million. We can't fund that all with debt. We need to look at the cash funding side as well. We need to maintain a stable capital structure. So with that, I believe I believe Keith is going to talk us through some of these capital improvements. Keith, I believe you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about Mayor and Council. I'm going to touch on what Chris mentioned here just briefly. You know, the good news is as we begin to see the wastewater treatment master planning process wrap up, and we do expect that one to be wrapped up here later on this summer. And just kind of high level. So as a reminder, we do treat all of the wastewater that is generated within our city, as well as all of the wastewater that comes from Castle Hills. The wastewater master plant is under a regulatory requirement to begin the planning for the expansion of the plant. The TCEQ requires when we get to 75% of our permitted capacity that we be in the planning and design stages for that expansion. We're permitted right now for 12 million gallons per day on average. We are a little over 9 at this point, so we do exceed that 75%. The good news is the master planning process that we're in satisfies the TCEQ that we were in the design stages. Now, when we do get to 90% of that 12 million gallons a day, then we have to be in the construction phase. We're projecting that to be sometime in 2023. That expansion, as we look at this chart on the graph here, it's talking about capital investment, and this is showing approximately the next 30 years. If you look at the 4 bars on the far left side, that accounts for about $45 million that our engineers are projecting we're going to need to spend over the next 5 years to increase that capacity. And Chris, if you go to the next slide, that shows kind of on a high level the overview of the treatment plant. Each of those numbered items are representative of a expansion project or an improvement project. The first and foremost is an electrical improvement project, and then it goes down through each of the various phases of the plant treatment process, and it hits on things like aeration basins, disinfection improvements, filter improvements, solids handling improvements and expansion, and then the headworks where the Prairie Creek pump station receives the sewage, pumps it up to the screens, coarse screens, fine screens. It has some programmatic changes for the laboratory, the administration and maintenance buildings. Some of the final items, the phosphorus removal, that's if it's required by the TCEQ when we renew our permit. Right now, there is no phosphorus limit in our permit, but it's something that they've been implementing at other plants. And then solids disposal, as y'all know, with the future closure of the DFW landfill where we currently dispose of all of our sludge disposal is going to become more expensive, and we're going to be looking at processes that could improve that the efficiency of our disposal. And so that's one of those additional projects that could be looked at. Overall, over that 30-year plan, we're looking at about $100 million investment in this treatment plant. And those are real dollars that we're going to have to fund through this rate structure. Chris, if you go to the next slide. So I'm gonna shift gears here and talk a little bit about water. We're also under a master planning process on the water side. You saw us present at the retreat talking specifically about water system. We are doing some changes between the 692 and the 740 pressure zone. And then of course the 735 pressure zone is where Castle Hills is. Our master planning process here on the water side is a little further behind than the wastewater, and I expect to get that sometime this fall. Once we have those, we'll spend a whole lot of time sitting in front of you in a workshop and going through in detail a lot of these issues. But suffice it to say, we're looking on the water side at some system improvements, both at the water plant as well as at some of our pump stations in the system, booster stations. Several of these have been in service for nearly 30 years at this point. They will need improvements, rehabilitation, additional storage needs, electrical needs. The other big thing coming out of that master plan is going to be looking at sources of our future water. You know, right now we buy treated water from Dallas Water Utilities at 9 million gallons a day. Our treatment plant is capable of producing 20 million gallons a day. And so that 29 million gallons a day will not be enough water as we continue to develop. And we're looking at what is our most economical option to get that next million gallons. Is it Dallas Water Utilities? Is it plant expansion? Or we're also considering, once we annex Castle Hills, we will suddenly become a wholesale customer of the Upper Trinity Regional Water District. And what options do we have to purchase additional treated water there? So we're looking at all of those options or combination of those options as part of this master plan. Chris, if you go to the next slide, please. So the last piece I have here to talk about is the Castle Hills component itself. As part of our master planning, we've done a detailed inspection of many of their facilities. We've identified some weaknesses, some areas that will need some improvement. We're working both internally with city management as well as district staff to see what of those improvements can we get them to fund in the next year or two, and make sure that the system that we get is in good condition and serviceable. And then what of those pieces do we need to plan for long-term investment? All of these items have a life expectancy, and they will need to be incorporated into our capital planning. And of course, the theme that we're talking about here, that will require additional dollars and funding that will need to come from that rate structure. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Chris. And obviously, if you all have any questions for me, I'll be here and available to answer questions at the end. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Keith. So as we talk about all of those capital needs, the chart that you see on the screen right now is what we've assumed right now for an initial projected CIP funding. The yellow bar that you see there, that's the anticipated cash funding, cumulative amounts year over year, whereas the blue bar is debt funding. And so as you look at this, cumulative through 2024, we're anticipating that about 58% of our capital needs will be funded with debt, 42% would come from cash. And so really, as we look at this, we're targeting kind of a 50-50, 60-40 capital structure, just reflecting that we're trying to push funding, particularly for repair and replacement, into that cash funding area. So with that said, how do we take our rate strategy and our capital plan and mesh it into a rate recommendation? And again, tonight we're talking about phase one. Phase one is an initial action effective October this year, commencing with fiscal year 2021. So I'm going to show you lots of rates here, but this really doesn't mean a lot just in terms of rates. So after we get done talking about rates, we're going to talk about customer impact, because I think that's the most important element of this, is what is the impact to our customers. But you see on the left-hand side of the screen, the current base or fixed charge that the city has adopted and what we're recommending for 2021. You can see there are some changes there in those fixed charges. On the right-hand side, you can see the volumetric rate change. The big element to the volumetric rate change is going from a flat rate of $3.26 per thousand going to an inclining block structure. As you heard me say earlier, the incline in that rate, meaning the rate differential from 331 up to 374, is not that, it's not significant at this time. It is a small incline. That is done on purpose. That is sending a minimal conservation signal because we are making this change. As we move into the future, those upper blocks can be escalated more aggressively to send a stronger conservation signal. But at the end of the day, we have to balance overall financial performance. So we have to be cognizant of an element that we call elasticity of demand. What elasticity of demand is, what we mean by that is that as the price increases, consumption tends to fall. Very basic economic concept. We all see it with gas prices. When gas prices go up, people tend to reduce their usage. They tend to take less trips. However, there's a difference between near-term elasticity and long-term elasticity. When that price bumps up really quickly, there's an immediate demand response, but then everybody gets used to it after a while and goes back to their old habits. And so while we look at this, we have to balance this within our rate design change. You can see we are estimating that there will be a slight decrease in consumption as the price increases. The factor we use is for every 10% increase in rates, there's a 2% decrease in consumption. That's long-term elasticity. That's the best measure we have right now that the state has provided us, but we have factored that into this plan. On the sewer rate side, again, you can see going to that differential, the residential rate, which is different than the commercial industrial rate, initially on the minimum charge side. We kept the volumetric rate the same as that phase one step, but we have changed the minimum charge between residential and commercial industrial going forward. So again, that's the rates, but let's talk about what the impact to the customer is. So what you see on the screen right now are 3 different residential customers. This is the combined monthly bill impact, total monthly bill for water and wastewater service. At 2,000 gallons, mind you, 2,000 gallons is the minimum level. You'll recall that we said 2,000 gallons is included in the minimum bill. Right now, a customer that only uses 2,000 gallons of water and sewage would pay $25.41. Our recommendation through these rates would take that to $27.41. That's a $2 increase per month. The next level, 5,000 gallons of water, 4,200 gallons of sewage, that's really a winter average customer, somebody that's using water in the winter. They would pay $43.68. Our rates that we've shown you tonight would increase that to $46.16 or $2.48 a month. The higher level, 10,000 gallons of water, 6,000 gallons of sewage, that's a larger customer, a customer that's using more of the system. Their increase would be closer to $3 a month under the rates that we've shown you this evening. On the commercial industrial side, what we did here, we just took the class average. We took all of the commercial customers and divided it, or we took all of their usage and divided it by the customers. That gave us 46,000 gallons. That's a lot of water and wastewater use, but that monthly bill increase would be $31.49. For a customer on the industrial side using significant amounts of water, 320,000 gallons of use, the monthly increase would be $86.29. So it's important that we understand the customer impact, but then we are often asked, how do we compare to our neighbors? And so what we've put on the screen right now is a comparison of monthly water and sewer bills with other municipal entities in the area. I show charts like this to council all the time, but I tell every council I'm in front of, you have to be careful because this is not apples to apples. Every city is different. Every city chooses to fund their utility differently. You also have different sources of water, different methods for treating wastewater. So there are numerous reasons why this graph looks the way it does. But I do want to point out right now, this is looking at that average customer, the 10,000 gallons of water, 6,000 gallons of sewer. Right now, that customer pays $66.93 in Louisville. Under the rates that we've shown you tonight, you would bump up just a little bit above Irving there to $69.93. But again, I would caution you need to do what's right for your city, for your utility. Again, you are the head of a business. You have to maintain the stability of your business. At the same time, every city on this list is going through this same exercise right now, looking at rates for next fiscal year. If we come in and look at this in October, it may look different. You may not have moved. We don't know until we get there. But just take note of that. We don't set rates based on a regional comparison. This is just a point of inquiry, and it's a comparison to look at as we make policy decisions. So again, to wrap up my presentation tonight, phase one, we are recommending that you consider implementing these rate structure changes in October. Phase 2 will come next year as we incorporate the district, the Castle Hills cost. We begin to determine those justifiable rate differentials and determine what this plan looks like on a going forward basis.
So council, Mayor and Council, do you have questions? We will be moving forward with this unless I hear otherwise tonight as we put together our 2021 budget. So we'll discuss it more at the budget workshop. We'll show you how we're operationalizing these new rates at the budget workshop. But Chris is available if you have any additional questions.
I have one question. Hello.
Go ahead.
I realize that on the 1-inch meters, we only have a little over 2,000 customers. So when I was looking at the proposed rate changes for 2021, I noticed that the 1-inch didn't change at all, but we changed it to 3/4. We changed it to 1.5. The 1.5, it makes sense too because of the equivalency factor. And I guess I could argue that it makes sense to leave the 1-inch the way it is because AWWA or whoever equivalency sets a 1-inch to be the same as 3/4. But at the same time, it did kind of raise that question, why, even though it's only 2,000, a little over 2,000 customers, why not change that 1-inch rate for some of that additional cash revenue to make the improvements we need? Why was it left out? Was there a reason it was left out?
The reason it was maintained, as you see within the recommendation, is really reflective of the pricing in the districts right now. You'll recall that the rates are the same for the districts right now for 1-inch and less. And as we move that direction, we were trying to be cautious of that. So to get there, you'll recall on that slide, I said some meter charges may increase while others stay the same. This is an instance of that, where we maintain the 1-inch rate, we start increasing the 3/4 inch to start meeting at a point in the future. That's really what's driving that recommendation. Now, that being said, you are correct. A 1-inch meter does place a higher demand on the system. So there is a cost factor there. But at the same time, we do want to be cognizant of that rate shock. And that's really what's driving that recommendation. The other element I would point out, and let me back up in the slide deck just right quick. I do want to point out that as we look at combining rates and coming up with this combined rate elements with the district upon annexation, you can see that the district has a significant amount of customers at that 1-inch level. And so that's another element that's driving our recommendation to come in and set 1-inch and below. We want to be cognizant of how we get to this point in the future. And we want to be cognizant that the district does have that higher level of 1-inch meter.
Okay. Okay. I think that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. City Manager, do you have anything else?
No, sir. We appreciate, Chris, your presentation. He takes a pretty difficult subject matter and simplifies it for us all, so we appreciate that very much. Mayor, we'll be bringing this back at the budget workshop for further discussion.
Okay. Ready on to regular agenda?
No. We're ready to go on to follow up on issues brought up during joint planning and zoning development code workshop.
Mayor and Council, Karen Walls is going to speak to this issue. You remember when we had the joint meeting with P&Z, there were a couple of areas that you had questions. So the team went back and did research and they're bringing forward some recommendations. Karen?
Thank you, Donna. Let me pull up the presentation here. Okay, can everyone see the screen? Okay. I know you've got a lot of things to do this evening, so I'm going to try to go through this rather quickly. Phyllis Jarrell of City Centric Planning is also on the call with me, and so if she's here to help me answer questions that you may have about the items that we wanted to come back and discuss with you this evening. You'll remember that at that joint workshop that Donna mentioned, there were a couple of items that you had questions and you wanted us to go and look at some further research on those. And so that's what we're bringing back tonight. There are two topics really. The question about front entry versus rear entry residential lots, and the question about pedestrian lighting. And so let me go through those each, and I'll try to go through this fairly quickly, and then we can go back to some of the exhibits if you have further questions on them. In terms of the front entry and rear entry question, the current code presently requires rear entry from an alley for single family residential, whether that's attached or detached. You only do front entry with a variance, and there are quite a few of those. So we're obviously trying to reduce things that need variances quite a bit. At the workshop, we were proposing the idea of allowing front entry on lots 40 feet wide and wider, and otherwise have rear entry. The questions that you all asked us at that time were, what is the effect in terms of affordability, in terms of market demand, in terms of the quality of the residential, and in terms of the design that would result from it. So we've tried to go through and put together some examples to show you kind of apples to apples comparison for these. And the pictures and the sketches I'm going to show you are detached units, but the same situation would apply in terms of attached units as well. So with this picture, the first thing to show you is just that there's three different kinds of entry situations that we wanted to talk about. The first one here on the left, the front entry lot, you can see the street here, you can see the driveways. So the houses are being accessed, the cars are coming in from the front of the house. And here's a picture, an example of what that looks like. And you can see that the garage is probably a little more than half of the width of what you see there from the street. The second version here is a rear entry lot. So you see the street is still down here, but then there's an alley in the back of the units, and the cars come in and park in the rear in the driveways that you see here. So this is the view from the street of what those homes look like. The third version that we wanted to talk about briefly is called a mews lot. And that term is from Old England, and it relates to houses that were sort of like the carriage houses behind the bigger houses. So in this case, again, there is an alley that goes in the back of the houses, and that's where the access is. The difference is that in this case, there is not a street in the front. As you see from this picture, the fronts of the houses face onto an open space area. So that creates a yet different style of design and characteristics. And so we wanted to talk about all three of these different styles of residential access. In doing that, we also wanted to look at that question about the width of the lot. And so with the rear entry, I'm gonna show you 5 different options. With the rear entry, there are 3 variations, if you will. 2 of those have a 40-foot wide lot, so it's the same width as for the front entry example. One of those is a 30-foot wide lot, so it's a narrower lot. But I'm going to show you the couple of versions that we see in terms of development and how those things play out in recent development activity. And what we tried to do in each one of these is look at these 4 things. Where are the service functions located? What does the front of the home look like? Where is the driveway parking and how much of it is there? And where is the on-street or visitor parking? And is that right by the homes or is it somewhere else? So let me try to go through these, the images for you on each one of those factors. So this is the first example. This is the front entry lot. You can see that it's a 40-foot width lot. Here's the street, here's the driveway. Here's that same image that we looked at a minute ago. That's the front view of the property. The service functions are also in the front. So you're seeing the same front view because that's where all of the utilities and so forth, where all of that takes place. Some of the factors to consider here, there is enough space in this setback to have 2 cars parked in that driveway. So there's parking available there. There is not quite a full car length of visitor parking or on-street parking here in front, because part of that lot is taken up by the driveway, as you can see here. As these lots get narrower, if it's narrower than 40 feet, you would see that the garage would take up an even larger proportion of the front facade. And so the look of the garage would become even more important in terms of the character and the quality of the unit. This is the second version. So this is still a 40-foot lot, but this is the rear entry lot. So the alley is in the back up at the top of this sketch here, and the street is here in the front. You can see the front view. So the house is brought up closer to the street, and there's not a garage or driveway or any of those automobile related things in the front. Instead, you see the back alley here, and this is where the service functions are. In this case, the house can be brought up closer to the street, as I said. There is room to have 2 spaces of on-street parking with a 40-foot lot in this instance, because there's not a driveway there. In the back, this driveway, this circumstance allows enough driveway in the back for 2 cars to park as well, without the cars overhanging into the alley. And so you see the alley area is in the back here. A second variation on this, if you will, is still the same 40-foot width. It's still the same alley. So the front of it looks similar, but in the back, rather than a full-length driveway, you see that the houses are brought up closer to the edge of the property. So there's not the same setback for a driveway and for parking of cars as you saw in the example before this. So again, the service functions are in the back. The front setback can be reduced. There still is room for 2 spaces of parking here, but there may not be enough room. There's not enough room to park in a driveway back here. So you may need to have some additional visitor parking or off-street parking somewhere else in this example. Here's the 30-foot rear entry lot. So again, you can see the front view here. You can see the alleys where the access and the service functions take place. And again, with this example, there is a full-length driveway so that the cars, 2 cars can be parked there in the back. The front setback can be reduced as well. Since this is a 30-foot wide lot, it is not quite enough room for 2 cars to park in the front in terms of the on-street parking. Again, with all of these, the garages don't come into play as far as the view or the look of the homes. Here's my last example. This is that Muse lot that I was talking about. And again, you can see here that the front of the houses, there is not a street. There is not pavement for vehicles to be in front of these houses. Rather, you see an alley in the back. You see the driveways in the back, and the service functions are all in the back. In this case, the alley is wider than what you saw before. Since this is the main, really the main place of access, it's not as wide as a full street, but it's wider than a typical alley. So it's kind of the midway point, if you will, in terms of the amount of paving that's needed for access. Again, you can have the driveway back here for the 2 cars to be parked. As I mentioned, in some of these, the visitor parking can become a consideration just based on how much parking there is available in driveway spaces and spaces available on the street. The designs that you see with the little asterisks here are all situations where we think that to design that subdivision properly and have it work well, that you may want to have spaces for visitor or off-street parking separately in a shared area, that rather than having it only right at the individual units. One of the questions that you all asked about was density and what does that mean for these different styles of homes and of entries. So the chart here is looking at the average densities based on typical lot sizes if you have this width, and if you factor in the amount of area that is taken up by the streets and the pavement. This doesn't include open space requirements. It's just looking at the pavement. And so you can see that the rear entry lot is a little bit larger than the front entry at the same lot width. The Muse lot is the smallest. It has the highest density, but keep in mind that's because a lot of that area is then going into the open space. So the homes themselves are a little closer together. And so you can see the range of that between the different options here. And that you can see that the rear entry narrower one is of course denser than any of the ones that are 40 feet. A big question that was a concern for y'all was affordability and the quality of the housing, and what does this mean for the future communities in Louisville. And so we looked into this, and particularly we talked to the members of our technical advisory roundtable, the developers who work in Louisville and elsewhere in the region, to find out about the impact of front versus rear entry on their costs and on affordability. And they were all very clear to us that the things that drive the price of the housing and affordability have to do with the price of the land, and it has to do with what price point they're targeting in the market, what they're trying to reach. They all said the entry design is not a factor that really plays into the cost of the housing. It's really not a factor for them in terms of that pricing. They felt like any one of these designs can be done in good quality with the right standards. And you can see that you need different standards for different ones of these configurations, but they did not see that one choice or another is leading to more affordable or less affordable, higher quality or lower quality development. And in fact, they said that they really like to have the flexibility of including more than one of these options even within the same project. And that's something that is already happening, and you're already seeing that in some places in Louisville now. In particular, the Heritage Trail townhomes in the village of Louisville has exactly this situation where there are several different designs that are used within the same project. And so we feel like having that flexibility is valuable to let the market respond to the different development trends. It's also important to give flexibility, since so much of the development that you're going to see is on lots that are kind of leftover lots or infill lots, where there may be some issues about the shapes, the dimensions, the sizes of the parcels that people are working with. We think this also creates more versatility, gives people more choices about their housing, and gives the ability for people to upscale or downscale with still remaining in the same neighborhood. So we think there are those advantages. And when you look at the aerial here, in fact, you see this example. The houses here are front entry 40-foot wide lots. The houses here are rear entry 45-foot lots. The houses here are rear entry 30-foot lots. And you can see that this is all within a particular development. So you can see how that variety works. So on this topic, the consultant team's recommendations to you is that we believe, rather than saying it has to be all one or the other, that the code, the new development code, should allow for all three of these entry types, the front, the rear, and the mews. But we think that each one needs its own appropriate standards so that the quality and the functionality will work for each type of entry. So that would be the recommendation that we bring back to you at this point as we continue drafting the updated code. I know I've covered a lot there. Would you like to talk about that first, or shall I go ahead and cover a couple slides on the pedestrian lighting as well before we have discussion?
I would like to say something about this real quick while it's fresh.
Okay, great.
So I agree that we need to have codes that are more flexible. I feel like, you know, just in my time on P&Z and the council, I've seen an awful lot of alley waiver requests. So I definitely think that allowing something beyond the alley section is good. It's interesting to hear that the developers say that it doesn't matter from their standpoint, as far as the entry type is really not guiding the pricing of the product. So that's good to know. What I do want to keep in mind is that while it may not affect the price point of the product, it is infrastructure that we have to maintain over time. So my personal preference is I don't like to see all of that infrastructure with the street in the front and the alley in the back. I don't know if we could look at some, if we're going to allow that, if we could look at, okay, if you're going to have an alley in the back, the street in the front can be more narrow. You know, if we're going to allow for all that parking in the back, to put something, a street section in the front that's more narrow and restricting some of the parking in the front, so that we don't have to have so much infrastructure in the back and then have so much infrastructure in the front too, just for long-term maintenance and, you know, just the cost of the replacing that infrastructure down the line.
Thank you.
So I have a comment too, and it's kind of dovetails off of that. Here, I'll turn my video on. So just so you can see my face. So the after the last session, I had a long conversation with Assistant City Manager Eric Ferris, just because we were, I think, on the phone talking about another issue. And then more recently with Claire, Assistant City Manager Powell, that I have this big concern. It's one thing to look at pictures of pristine new development and say, this is what the alley looks like, but I can walk from here down Valley Parkway to Fox and look at alleys that are just a nightmare. They're overgrown, they're trashy. I hate to say that about my own city, but people don't maintain the growth beyond their fence in the back like they should. So, and then on top of that, my other concern is exactly what Councilwoman Green expressed, which is these alleys are an additional maintenance cost for the city. I sort of favored moving that driveway to the front of the house or make it a side entry or whatever, just to place the responsibility for any maintenance issues of the concrete on the homeowner, which shouldn't really create a great burden, because the concrete that's required for an alley or the concrete that's required for a city street has to endure a lot more traffic than somebody's front driveway. So the paving standards are very different. I guess I can't really tell a developer you can't do an alley, but over time, they get to be really ugly and they get to be a maintenance cost. So I still have big concerns about creating alleys.
I think that at the joint workshop, one of the comments was made by, I don't remember if it was staff or one of on council, that some of those existing alleys are well below the standards that we would require now for alleys. So I think that that's one of those factors. But you were certainly right that the standards make a difference in how that alley is maintained over time, for sure. The other factor, of course, is the front and the view of the front of the home and how much space is taken up there with the vehicles and so forth.
Yeah, and it is a trade-off, and also pushing more cars onto the street is already a problem. I think one thing though that when I look at your models that I kept being struck by is that there was somewhat a built-in assumption that the homeowner had 2 cars or less. And we have homeowners that have, you don't want to know how many vehicles I have. Everybody will get a good laugh out of that. So if you know me, but I have a big driveway and 2 large garages, so I keep them off the street. But a lot of houses now, and especially because of financial circumstances, have kids that have gone to college and come back home, or parents that are living with their children. And so we end up with 3, 4, 5 cars at a single residence.
And I think that's partly why we felt like we wanted to show those numbers as far as the parking, with the driveways, with the space on street, that in some of these cases where there's not very much space on the driveway and the lots are narrow, that you would then, in that kind of a subdivision design, you would want to have visitor parking spaces. And yeah, not all the people who live in the home might, they might not want to have to walk very far to get to the house, but certainly guests might need to, and certainly that could be one of the ways to address that as well.
So that particular idea, I would like to see in the development code.
Of having that kind of space for the shared visitor parking.
Yes, and this, for me, dates back to, some people will recall the development that was proposed on the Tonkovich Cotter land that was 76 townhomes. And I just couldn't imagine what it would be like when Christmas came with the density that they had proposed and the amount of parking, other than to imagine that everybody was going to go across to the rec and senior center and park over there, because there wouldn't be a place to park. So having some, in some instances, having some community parking areas, and especially, I guess it's not so bad if you go over to the senior center and the community center on a Christmas Eve, but because nobody else is there, but not every neighborhood has that kind of parking lot across the street.
Sure. Well, if from the direction that I'm hearing from you all this evening, what I think we could do is continue working on drafting the code, allowing for the various entry types, but looking at the changes of addressing that visitor parking or community parking, looking at a narrower street in the instance of the alley layouts, and looking at that question of the trade-off of the driveway space and amount of pavement versus an alleyway pavement, but to come back to you with standards that would be applicable to these various, all three different types, so that there's some option and some flexibility, but at the same time, a reasonable standard.
And then I want to, yes, I want to throw one more item in that originally was not on my list, and that is the heat island effect of additional pavement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The impact.
Yeah. That's certainly an issue. I think you're heading toward that Muse Street, I'd say.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah.
And a permeable service.
Permeable, sure. Other comments or further direction on these items?
Well, I want to say that I'm in favor of providing the options, of various options. I just happened to be talking to a couple over the weekend who are in the process of deciding where they're going to move. And one of their requirements is that they want to have a rear entry alley. So, I was sort of surprised actually by their comment, but that was one of their requirements for picking a location, was that there be rear entry alleyway.
Interesting. Yeah, we did hear from the developers that they have a lot of interest in that design style. So. Okay, with that, let me just cover quickly the issues on pedestrian lighting. At this time, the code does not require pedestrian lighting except for in some places within the I-35 overlay. At the time we did the joint workshop in May with the council and planning and zoning, we were proposing that there be some kind of a minimum level of lighting for sidewalks and trails on private property. The questions that you all asked were, where exactly is this going to apply, and how will it address the concerns about dark skies? So as we've continued to work on this and discuss it and research it, our proposal at this point would be that these pedestrian lighting standards would apply in commercial, retail, and multifamily developments. We think it's a really important safety concern getting from the sidewalk or from the parking or the parking areas to the front of the building. So that safety and being able to see that area is really important. It would not apply in single family neighborhoods in general. The only instance that it might apply there would relate to those pedestrian pass-throughs that we discussed at the joint workshop, where we're providing a way for people to walk through at the end of a cul-de-sac or on a very long block And there again, we think that that would be relevant because of the safety concerns of wanting people to feel comfortable using those pass-throughs and actually walking through there. You can see a couple of examples here in the image. We think that we would want, there should be a pedestrian lighting standard. This lighting would be located on private property maintained by the property owners. This is not something we're suggesting for public maintenance or for the public right-of-way. The standard that's shown here of the lighting level of 0.5 foot candles was recommended by the Technical Advisory Roundtable folks. That's also consistent with the experience of landscape architects and designers on our team. And there are designs for both bollard style and for pedestrian style lighting that is shielded so that the light is focused downwards to address the concerns about dark skies. So at this point, the recommendation that our team would bring to you is, as you see on this slide, using the 0.5 foot candle as the minimum light level along pedestrian pathways. That when we say pedestrian pathways, we mean in commercial, retail, and multifamily, we're talking about the sidewalk or walkway from a building entrance to the public sidewalk or to a parking area. In residential, it would only be for designated pedestrian pass-throughs in a subdivision. We believe it's possible and appropriate to allow either the use of bollards or 15-foot standards with pedestrian lighting, but we think it's really important to specify the lighting designs with directional shielding to meet dark sky objectives. This also prevents light from spilling onto adjacent property. So the resident next door to the pass-through or somebody in a commercial or multifamily area, for example. In the course of talking about this and looking at these recommendations, we realized that right now, not only is the dark skies a question for these pedestrian lights, but that the city doesn't really have specific regulations for lighting in general that would address these dark sky objectives. And so we're asking the question at this point, we think it would be appropriate as we update the ordinance to go back and look at the rest of the site lighting requirements as well to make sure that they are properly addressing dark sky objectives. The last point on this here is requiring a photometrics plan as part of the engineering site plan submittal. This is happening now, but we want to just make sure that it's formalized in the code. So these are the recommendations. We feel like this is a good way to strike a balance between pedestrian safety and dark skies. Again, it relates to private property, not public property, and not public maintenance of these facilities, fixtures.
Karen?
Yes.
Is it all right if I ask a question on this?
Sure.
So, doesn't our parking lighting probably already cover this? I mean, so much of our parking lot lighting, commercial lighting in the city, we already know spills over or is in excess. I mean, is this just trying to find a solution to a problem we don't have?
The areas that we're concerned about, it's not the parking lot itself. It's the pathway that takes you from the parking lot to, say, the front doorway of your apartment. So you're walking on a pathway through the property, and it's those areas that we're concerned about in this instance.
Okay, so in multifamily, there might be a use case there, but commercial and retail, we're not. I don't see that being relevant.
Karen, this is Claire, you can't see me, hold on. Let me add something to that. So, Councilman Gilmer, you're absolutely correct. So, when we're asking for a photometrics plan, we're gonna be looking at that 0.5 foot candle. If it's already provided and it's already lit by the parking, let's say the parking lot has some lights and it's already a lit path, there would be no additional lights required. So this is, if there is not that minimum 0.5 foot candle, then they would look at putting in pedestrian lighting.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, Claire.
So, Karen?
Yes.
Your added bullet, review all site lighting regulations for dark sky objectives. Personally, I would be very much in favor of taking a look at that. And in one particular category I'd also like to look at is decorative landscape lighting. Some locations use an uplight, some use a downlight. Obviously, the uplight doesn't do anything for dark skies, and the downlight solves that problem. So there's one example of where I would be looking at other lighting regulations.
It seems like this would be an appropriate time to take a look at as we're working through all of the different sections of the code, to try to take a complete, consistent look at all of those questions.
Yes, definitely.
Other comments or questions? Okay, well then we will proceed to go ahead and continue work on drafting the ordinance itself, following, incorporating these provisions for the pedestrian lighting in, as Claire said, in the cases where that photometric plan shows that there is not adequate lighting already, and incorporating the dark skies. So with that, I thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Karen. So with that, Mayor and Council, we have completed the topics that we wanted to cover in this council meetings workshop.
Now we'll go to the regular agenda.
Public hearing number 1. Public hearing. Consideration of an ordinance granting a special use permit for a minor automobile services facility on approximately 0.918 acres located at 761 West Brown Grove Road, FM 3040. As part of this SUP, the applicant is proposing added stonework to the front facade and additional landscaping. The recommendation is that the City Council approve the ordinance as set forth in the caption. Planning Director Richard Lupke is available to address any questions.
Okay.
Mr. Lupke, do you have any speakers where you're at right now?
No, we do not.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any questions right now from the council?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Mayor Pro Tem Troyer made the motion. Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Those were all aye votes, Mayor.
Okay. Do we have a second motion?
Move to approve.
I'm on the right one.
You're on the second. Are you going to the second one? The first one passed. Okay. I'm sorry, was that Councilmember Jones that made the motion? We need a motion to approve the ordinance. Councilmember Jones, was that you that made the motion?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Second. Okay. Council.
This is an ordinance of the Louisville City Council amending the zoning ordinance by granting a special use permit for minor automotive services, including tune-up and repair services, on approximately 0.91 acres, legally described as Lot 2R, Block A, Razaz, Louisville Edition, located at 761 West Brown Grove Road, FM 3040, and Zone Local Commercial District, providing for repeal or severability, penalty, and an effective date, declaring an emergency.
Okay. City Secretary, call the roll.
Councilmember Jones made the motion. Councilmember Gilmore seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor. Those were all aye votes.
Okay. Item 2.
Public hearing number 2, consideration of an amended concept plan for plan development ordinance number 4255-11-2015, known as the Villages at Louisville, on approximately 90.588 acres located on both the east and west sides of Summit Avenue north of the Kansas City Southern Railroad and Grandy's Lane, with frontage on the west side of I-35E, North Stemmons Freeway, and the east side of McGee Lane. The recommendation is that the City Council continue the public hearing to the July 20th, 2020 City Council meeting. Richard Lukey, Planning Director, is available to address any questions.
Okay. Do you have a motion to continue the public hearing?
Motion to continue the public hearing till the July 20th, 2020 council meeting.
Second.
Okay. A motion and a second. Is there any discussion? City Secretary, call the roll.
Councilmember Green made the motion. Councilmember Jones seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Schroyer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Mayor, those were all aye votes.
Okay, thank you. Item 3.
Public hearing number 3. Consideration of an ordinance amending the Plan Development District established by ordinance number 4225-11-2015 Z by adopting amended development standards and all attachments thereto, with 10 associated variance requests on approximately 90.588 acres located on both the east and west sides of Summit Avenue north of the Kansas City Southern Railroad in Grandy's Lane, with frontage on the west side of I-35E, North Stemmons Freeway, and the east side of McGee Lane. The recommendation is that the City Council continue the public hearing to the July 20th, 2020 City Council meeting.
Okay. Do you have a motion to continue the public hearing?
Yes, I move to
Continue the
continue
public hearing till-
to July 20th, 2020 City Council meeting.
Second.
Because. Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay. City Secretary, call the roll.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson made the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Ferg seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Schroyer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Mayor, those were all aye votes.
Okay, thank you. Item D.
Visitor Citizen Forum. Citizens visitors wanting to speak may join, I apologize. Speakers must address their comments to the mayor rather than to individual council members or staff. Speakers should speak clearly and state their name and address prior to beginning their remarks. Speakers will be allowed 5 minutes for testimony. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, and slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, the City Council is restricted from discussing or taking action on items not listed on the agenda. Action can only be taken at a future meeting. Mayor, I have no speaker cards. Mr. Lukey, do you have any cards?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Thank you. And we have no one through Zoom wishing to speak either.
Okay, we'll move on then. Consent agenda.
All of the following items on the consent agenda are considered to be self-explanatory by the council and will be enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests. For a citizen to request removal of an item, a speaker card or e-comment card must be filled out and submitted to the city secretary. Mayor received no cards. We have no one that wishes to speak. And just to confirm, Mr. Lukey, you also have no cards.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Got those? Got the motion second. City Secretary, call the roll.
Councilmember Green made the motion. Councilmember Jones seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Schroyer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore,
Aye.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Mayor, those are all aye votes.
Okay, thank you. We're down to section D, item 8.
Agenda item 8, consideration of spectrum agreement to provide cable services to Thrive and the authorization for the city manager to execute the agreement. After reviewing possible options for providing cable services at Thrive, staff recommends executing an agreement with Spectrum. The recommendation is that the city council approve the agreement as set forth in the caption and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement. Director of Parks and Recreation, Stacy Anaya, is available to address any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions right now? Okay, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, City Secretary, call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Troyer made the motion. Councilmember Jones seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore,
Aye.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Mayor, those are all aye votes.
Okay, thank you. Next one.
Agenda item 9, consideration of a resolution appointing one member to the Board of Managers of the Denko Area 911 District. The Denko Area 911 District has requested that each participating city vote for one of the candidates and advise the district of its selection prior to 5 p.m. on July 31st, 2020. The recommendation is that the City Council approve the resolution appointing one member to the Board of Managers of the Denko Area 911 District.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve and to appoint a member?
Yes, I move that the city council approve a resolution appointing Jim Carter to the Board of Managers of the Denko Area 911 District.
Second.
Get those?
I did.
Okay. Is there any discussion? City Secretary, call the roll.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson made the motion. Councilmember Jones seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore,
Aye.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Mayor, those were all aye votes.
Okay, thank you. Item 10.
Agenda item 10, consideration of an ordinance amending section 7-37 to amend the hours of solicitation. Staff recommends that the hours of solicitation for internet merchants be amended to be consistent with other provisions within the city code, which allow general service part vendors and mobile food establishments to sell until sunset. The recommendation is that the city council approve the ordinance as set forth in the caption.
Okay. Do I have
Move
a
to
motion?
approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Councilor?
This is an ordinance of the Louisville City Council amending the Louisville City Code, Chapter 7, Article 2, itinerant merchants, Section 7-37 by amending the hours of solicitation, providing a repeal or severability penalty and an effective date, declaring an emergency.
Okay, City Secretary, call the roll.
So Mayor Pro Tem Troyer made the motion. Councilmember Green seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson,
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore,
Aye.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Mayor, those were all aye votes.
Okay, thank you. Item 11.
Agenda item 11, consideration of an ordinance amending section 15-205 by prohibiting parking on the north side of Pulsar Road from Holy Grail Drive to 650 feet west of Holy Grail Drive, fronting the Pulsar Elementary School. In order to alleviate Pulsar Elementary School related queuing and associated traffic spillback onto the public street and intersection blockage during student pickup and drop-off times, the City of Carrollton submitted a request to the City of Louisville and the Denton County Freshwater Supply District 1A to prohibit parking on the north side of Pulsar Road. All signage and markings will be installed and maintained by the City of Carrollton, and enforcement of the parking restriction will be done by the City of Louisville. The Transportation Board recommended approval by a vote of 7-0. The recommendation is that the City Council approve the ordinance as set forth in the caption. City Engineer David Salmon is available to address any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Do you have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? Counselor?
This is an ordinance of the Louisville City Council amending the Louisville City Code, Chapter 15, Article 8, Traffic Regulations in Castle Hills, Section 15-205, stopping, standing, or parking prohibited on specific streets by prohibiting parking on the north side of Pulsar Road, providing for repealer severability, penalty, and effective date, declaring an emergency.
City Secretary, call the roll.
Councilmember Jones made the motion. Councilmember Gilmore seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Schroyer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Mayor, those are all aye votes.
Thank you. Item 12.
Agenda item 12. City Council direction related to the city's 2020 fall and winter special events. Due to the pandemic response, cities are making significant changes to planned events or canceling those events altogether, and the state has reimposed a prohibition on outdoor gatherings. There also are budget considerations due to major shortfalls in hotel tax revenue. The recommendation is that the City Council give direction on whether to hold or cancel the 2020 fall and winter events, on proposed safety procedures for festivals and concerts, and on potential Western Days budget cuts. I believe Communications Director James Cunkey has a presentation on this item.
Okay, proceed.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. We are going to talk special events once again. I pressed. There we go. We want to talk to you about our 2020 fall and winter events. And there's several topics we want to touch on. One is the Emergency Order GA-28 issued last week by Governor Abbott. We want to talk about proposed health protocols for Western Days and potentially other events. Budget considerations are still important. If indeed events are canceled, there are certain impacts, economic and cultural. And then there's other options beyond just going forward or canceling. So we're going to touch on each of these fairly briefly. Let's start with a recap. When I came to you in April and we talked about our spring and summer events, the decision at that time was to cancel events that already were in the middle of the early pandemic response. That's St. Patty's, Colorpalooza, and the Jam Session. You cannot see my presentation. Well, let's see if we can figure out why. Well, that's not it. Okay. Oh, maybe because I didn't hit the share button, so just bear with me. I skipped one minor step, but it is fixable. Yes. Okay, so that's the beautiful screen we don't need to worry about. So spring and summer events, 3 of them were canceled because of pandemic response. We couldn't have gatherings at the time. Businesses were shut down. That's St. Patty's, Colorpalooza, and Jam Session. And when we came to you in April, our recommendation was to go ahead and cancel the June and July events also, Fiesta Chara, Sounds of Louisville, and Red, White, and Louisville. And just a reminder, that wasn't directly because of the COVID-19 pandemic response. That was because the business shutdown, especially hotels, had really done a big negative number on our hotel tax revenue, up to $1 million shortfall projected. And so cutting those events was a budget decision as opposed to a public health decision. We also, not in our department, but as a city, stopped issuing special event permits at that time because of the pandemic response. And I'll tell you that generally the public was supportive of that. We saw on Facebook, some people misunderstood. They thought we were canceling July events in April because we were worried about gatherings. As it turns out, we would have been right. But that's not why. We canceled it as a budget. And the fact that we did a very good video featuring our city manager explaining that, people understood. They were disappointed, but they were generally supportive of us in making that decision. There's been some recent pushback, especially from our merchants here in Old Town, who are disappointed we're not doing any events as they are reopening. And they're wanting us to help them bring in crowds. But again, as it turned out, the situation is not improved by now as much as we had hoped. So looking now at fall and winter events, the intent was that Western Days would be our big return to having festivals and events. Being at the end of September, everybody being optimistic, well, most people being optimistic, we were hoping that by the end of September, there'd be some normalcy and we would be able to continue the Western Days tradition. But that was an if, a great big bold underlined if. If large outdoor gatherings are allowed, if we can have suitable minimum health protocols so that the event can be held safely in a public health crisis, and if hotel fund revenue supports it. We're seeing some encouraging signs in hotel fund, but it's still very much down. It's not where it needs to be. When we came to you in April, we didn't make a decision on Western Days then. You said, come back in the summer and tell us what the situation is. That's what we're doing right now. We want to add to that conversation the Rocktober concert series. Those were held the last 3 weeks of October, and they start just 9 days after Western Days. We believe that really the decision on Western Days, Rocktober needs to follow that. They're so close together. If the situation doesn't allow us to hold Western Days the way we want, it's not going to dramatically change 9 days later. So we think those are linked discussions. Both of those decisions really need to be made, well, now, basically. And I'll explain why in the subsequent slides. Old Town Holiday Stroll is in December. We have a little bit more time than that, but not a whole lot more time. It gives us an opportunity to really study some options. We're talking to Maine and Mill Association about possibly shifting some responsibilities over to them. We would provide some funding. They would provide the planning and execution of some event activities. Very preliminary discussions. We're going to take a little more time to really work on that. The latest we hear from public health officials is that there's the possibility that by the end of the year that there could be an approved vaccine, but even if there is, it'll be several months before it rolls out enough that we can have some immunity within our population. So December might be overly optimistic, but we're trying to keep a happy face where we can. So we'll come back on Holiday Stroll after we flesh out those options. So here we are through the month of June. Texas had, as we know, a large increase in confirmed cases, the percentage of COVID-19 tests that came back positive, and hospitalizations. In fact, we saw information today from Dr. Richardson of Denton County that we are hitting record highs for the number of confirmed cases. It's not just because we're doing more tests, and we know that because the percentage or the positivity number, the percentage of tests that come back positive has more than tripled during the month of July, from around 4% to more than 14% statewide. Our county number was 11% last week, it's 10% this week. So that means even though we're doing more tests, we're getting 2 to 3 times as many positive responses. So that tells us there's definitely increased community spread no matter how many tests we're doing. And then number of hospitalizations in Denton County, we're at about half of our hospital capacity. So that's a pretty good number. Some metro areas it's much worse. And what Dr. Richardson told us today is that generally when you see a sudden spike in positive tests, about 2 weeks later, you usually see a spike in hospitalizations. And a week or two after that, you start seeing increases in the death counts. If that's true, and it's been true so far, then sometime about a week to 10 days from now, you will expect to see hospitalization numbers pick up significantly throughout the state. So with all of that going on, Governor Abbott has slowed down the reopening process in Texas. Last week, he issued Executive Order GA-28. This is not the mask order, that's GA-29. We're not going to talk about that so much, but GA-28 was very significant because at the time, it said that any outdoor gathering of more than 100 people was prohibited unless the local mayor or county judge approved it. About 5 days later, he issued a proclamation to amend GA-28, and now in the state of Texas, an outdoor gathering in excess of 10 people is prohibited unless it is specifically approved by the mayor or county commissioner. Those approvals can be subject to various conditions or restrictions so long as they don't violate the state order. And the governor mentioned specific factors that should be considered: your projected attendance, the number of attendees over age 65, your ability to maintain social distancing, and the level of transmission in the county. Denton County is significant transmission. GA28 does not have an expiration date. Now, typically, an emergency executive order is tied to a disaster declaration. Governor's disaster declarations are running 30 days at a time. The next one expires on July the 14th. It is almost certain he'll extend for another month to August the 14th. So there's a de facto expiration on the executive orders that they will expire when the disaster declaration ends, because the disaster declaration is what gives the authority for the executive order. So even though you don't see an expiration date in the executive order, which in theory means it could go on forever, you really want to look at the expiration date in the disaster declaration. That'll be the first domino, and that domino is not coming up in the next 2 weeks. So as long as the current orders remain in place, we cannot hold Western Days or Rocktober or the Stroll. In fact, we unfortunately had to notify Maine and Mill Association last week that the governor's order makes the first Friday a prohibited event also. Not a decision we want to pass along, but a decision that the state made for us, and we are expected to carry that out. So we're going to stop right up and talk about proposed health protocols. We know that as it sits right now with the executive orders, we could not hold Western Days. But by the end of September, maybe things turn around. And if they turn around, we want to make sure that the event is held safely. The number one priority for our event is that it be held in a safe manner, not just for injuries and accidents, but also for public health. So that's number one. And to do that, we'll have to have some new protocols. Now, your memo lists a number of protocols in great detail, but some of them, well, we'll get to what they are in a minute. Some of the specific ones could have some significant changes on the event. They're all in keeping with the state of Texas. You see here, Open Texas offers some very broad protocols, and they're all directed at the people showing up. So if I go to a festival, these would apply to me. If I'm holding a festival, the state and national governments have been largely silent. CDC has said nothing, WHO has said nothing. In fact, the CDC and WHO, all they say is don't do it. They haven't said, if you're going to do it, here's how to do it safely. They're saying today, it's not safe. So based on the limited guidance we've gotten, we've developed a list of protocols. Here's the most significant ones. The first is we want to minimize attendance. Right now, we get about 30,000 people at Western Days. We could not safely handle 30,000 people. Even if they all wore masks and gloves and face covers and carried hand sanitizer with them at all times, you can't keep distancing on that. It won't be safe. So we want to reduce attendance, and the most effective way to limit attendance is to charge admission throughout the day. Right now, starting at 7 o'clock, we charge a $10 admission. The proposal from staff is charge $10 all day, charge $20 starting at 7 o'clock. That's the people that show up just for the concert, and for them, $20 for a top-notch concert is cheap. But again, we want to prevent lines at the gate. So we would offer a steeply discounted, probably $5 pre-festival ticket online, no matter what time you show up. So you could save anywhere from $5 to $15 a person by buying it online, and that would reduce the lines at the gate. We want to look at reducing the number of vendors so they can be spaced out more. We're looking at how do you socially distance people in front of a stage. It's kind of a mosh pit situation. You just can't do it without some extreme measures. We've looked at putting out tables and chairs, but we've seen from other events, people will move them wherever they want. You don't want to bolt them down the middle of the street. I think Keith Marvin would have a little fit if I tried to put bolts in the middle of his street. We looked at putting tape or paint or chalk circles and squares on the ground and get people to separate. That's hard to enforce, and it puts our police in a very difficult situation of trying to enforce that in a big crowd of concert attendees. The best thing we've come up with is to put a partition parallel to the front of the stage at around the edge of the sound tent. So the front 50 to 70 feet is fenced off, and either don't allow anybody there or only allow people there if they are wearing a mask, and they must wear a mask at all times. You won't be able to ensure distance. You can limit how many people go in, but at least now you've made a sincere effort to keep it safe. We'd like to look at doing a cashless, touchless system for all point of sale transactions. That's for food orders, kids activities, everything. There's a cost to this. because we'd have to boost the Wi-Fi footprint, and we'd also have to buy some scanning equipment and bracelets and so forth. But it's something that some events have gone to, and this is probably the future of our events. Whether the future is now or next year, we don't know, but we're getting there. The kids' attractions would change. Right now, we deliberately get a bunch of high capacity, high contact bouncies, inflatables. The jousting, the big slide, the obstacle course, because you can cram bunches and bunches of kids in there all at once. And you're just running kids through there as fast as you can because there's so many kids that want to go. Well, from a public health standpoint, that's a really, really bad idea. So we would replace probably all of those with mechanicals. Mechanicals cost a little bit more, take more footprint. They don't take as many kids at once. You load, they ride, they get off, you clean, you load again. So it would slow things down a little bit, but it'd be in terms of contact and distancing much safer. We wouldn't require or recommend requiring masks throughout the festival zone. First off, it's late September. We don't want to create any heat-related issues. We also think it's just incredibly tough to enforce. We think it's reasonable, though, that if people want to enter a city building, we would expect them to put on a mask while they're inside the city building, MCL Grand or City Hall. And then finally, we're going to do this regardless, but I put it on here, is increase the number of sanitizing and hand washing stations throughout the festival. And wherever we have seating areas, right now we spread seating areas all over the festival zone. We gather those up into a limited number of seating areas and have a cleaning crew specifically assigned to wipe down those tables and chairs, hopefully as soon as a person gets up and leaves. If they're quick and we can't get there, we might miss a few, but we'll try. Some of these would apply to any event we did, such as the sanitizing or the spacing of vendors. Some of these obviously are very specific to Western days. There's a much more detailed list in your memo, but these are the ones that would have a direct and highly visible impact on the event. Now to budget. I mentioned that we're seeing some encouraging signs from hotels. Our hoteliers were around 70% occupancy when this started. They dropped to 40, they dropped to 20, now they're back up above 40. So they've rebounded faster than we thought they would, but they're still not anywhere close where they need to be. And we do think that it's going to be slow gains for the next year to year and a half. So it's not a doomsday scenario, but it's not all, roses either. So we feel as if canceling the spring and summer events created enough of a cushion that with revenue showing the slight improvements that we'd probably be okay with our existing Western Days budget if the hotel tax doesn't drop again, if we don't have another closure or another big travel issue. We've already made some reductions. We trimmed $40,000 out of the main stage entertainment budget. Now that comes from the activities fund, not the hotel fund. The difference is the activities fund where we put all of our festival and event revenue, sponsors and vendors fees and concessions, all goes into that. So 40,000 down, and believe me, the lineup we have committed, you won't notice the difference. You'll think we paid more than we did if we can just get them there. And then we also have figured that there's no way we can physically distance the Cattle Drive Parade route along Main Street and Mill Street. We just cannot ensure that will be safe. We don't want to create a super spreader event. So we've already determined that the Cattle Drive Parade simply cannot be held this year because of the public health situation. That creates a $10,000 reduction in the budget that might go to hand sanitizer stations. In addition, we found some other cuts we could make. This is if the hotel revenue does not continue to improve or if it takes another drop. Here's some cuts we could make. They're more or less in the order we would recommend them. We want to show you these in case there's some here that cause you a real issue. If there's any here you just strongly disagree with. The first is to reduce or eliminate the television advertising. TV advertising is great. It looks good. I saw an ad a few years ago in the middle of a Cowboys game. That was remarkable. Our surveys show that virtually no one shows up at our event because they saw it on TV. They show up because they saw it on the internet. They show up because they heard it from a friend. They show up because they were here last year. So the TV advertising looks great, but it gets us pretty much nothing. Eliminating the AV package for the sponsor hospitality suite on the 3rd floor of City Hall. Eliminate the cooking demonstration. A couple of these have some sponsorships attached. We would lose those sponsorships. This is one. We save $2,000 in expense, but we lose $1,500 in the sponsorship. Eliminate the koozie giveaway. Reduce our rent decor package. Reduce our tent rental contract. We're very hesitant on this because that would put some additional labor on parks. I can already imagine Stacy is shivering a bit over that. because they already have a heavy workload for us. But we would have to use our tents to replace the rental tents. The possibility of reducing the festival zone. You might recall 2 years ago, we extended the festival zone down Charles Street. We did that because we were running out of room because things were developing. That's good. We did it also to include what was then Witherspoon is now Bent Distillery into the festival zone. We added a stage. We had some activities the first year. This past year was the MDA Firefighter Barbecue. If you want to reduce the size of the crowd, you want to eliminate some gates. Taking this off would have a financial savings. It also would take away a gate and take away a crowd. It's down on our list because we'd rather not do it. We're kind of skeptical. If you reduce the size, do you actually reduce the crowd or just cram the same number of people into a smaller space? But it's an option if budget becomes an issue. Eliminating the Native American dancers, eliminating the pony rides, and then finally suspend the Major League Eating contest. I'll tell you, we've talked to Major League Eating. They definitely want to come here. We mentioned to them that if they did, we want to run our event in flights, still have 12 eaters, but have 3 flights of 4 eaters and do a full sanitization between each one. They said, hey, great idea, we're trying to use that everywhere. So there'd be changes if we have it to make it safer for the participants, but if we need to, we can reduce that also for a year. So if we cancel Western Days right now, we've spent about $150,000 out of the $700,000 budget. We would get about $31,000 of that back. We might get a little bit more than that. We're hearing from some of the band's managers very unofficially that if we have to cancel the event because of the governor, if that order stays in place through September, then they would be open to refunding some or all of the deposits we paid them. Those are a lot of ifs. That's why I didn't put that number in here. But $31,000 we're confident about. As we get closer to the event, that number gets smaller because we spend more and there's more we can't refund. Cancellation also means we're not bringing 30,000 visitors to Old Town. Our Old Town businesses really like that impact. We like that impact. So you're giving something up. You're giving up about $2 million in estimated economic impact citywide from the event. So cancellation has impacts. Yeah, it saves us some money. It does take away some revenue, but we never make as much revenue as we spend in expenses. But it also has the cultural impact of losing an event that's been around in some form since 1965. There are other options. Again, canceling, we need to decide now whether we want to just cancel it and move on. However, if you want to give yourself some more time, if you want to pull this a little bit farther, we could choose not to cancel, but if that's the case, keep in mind that the mayor always has the authority to withdraw his approval of the event. And remember, the governor specifically wrote it that the mayor has that authority. It's not staff, it's not council, it's the mayor. He has to approve it, he can withdraw his approval. So if you choose now, let's keep going to see how things work out. If we get to the middle of August and things are getting worse, not better, we can always still cancel. It just means we lose a little bit more money than we would lose today. We looked at doing a one-day event. One-day event, simply the savings are decent, not great, but it's not as much as you would think. It's not half the budget. I can't read the number because it's covered by people's faces. I thought it was 120,000. Let me move your faces around. Oh, 122, I remember very well. 122,000 that we would save if we went from a 2-day to a 1-day event. I will tell you, our hoteliers would be unhappy. We're spending hotel tax. They prefer a 2-day event. But it could be done. And then we're looking at the possibility of taking the festival largely online. This is still a little bit incomplete, but we saw that the Detroit Jazz Festival is going entirely online. They're going to stream their 4-day festival live on their TV channel. They even have a deal with an ABC affiliate to do some portions of it live on ABC affiliate, also online through their social media and through their website. And so they're going to do all their performances on multiple stages, just with no audience, and they're going to have the festival. So it gives people something to watch at home. It gives some good things to do. It also helps preserve their sponsorships. We've talked, again, very informally with the agents for our big bands, and they are open to it. They're not ready to commit, but they're open. Remember, a lot of these paid bands have not had a paid gig since March. So the idea of seeing their payday go away is not appealing to them. So they're open to it, as long as we don't record it, where it could then be subsequently sold or reproduced, which we would agree not to record it. We also could do the Native American dancers, the tamales, we could do some community groups, we could do all kinds of performances. We'd run them probably inside MCL Grand. The stage inside the performance hall is actually larger than our Western Day stage, and it's weatherproof. We can close the doors so we don't gather a crowd by accident, because we would have no audience for this. Again, social distancing and so forth. We could rotate between the performance hall and the black box. We think we could do either all day Saturday or Friday and Saturday and do a pretty good show that would reach a lot farther than Louisville's boundaries or Denton County's boundaries. We wouldn't get any real revenue off of it. This would be what we would do if we want to go ahead and do something just to maintain the Western Days tradition and keep our sponsors happy. If we were to do that, we think we would save about $400,000 out of the budget, because we're not renting fences or portalets or stages or sound systems. That's a very rough estimate right now. It could be anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000, but 400 we feel is in the range. And we haven't talked to our sponsors yet to see if they're okay with this. We think if we tell them we can put a little 30-second thank you for each sponsor in the middle of the broadcast, they'd be happier. And we can do that. So that's an online option that we're still developing, and we're not going to go far down that road unless council really chooses that option. Which gets us to the decision slide. The first one is, do you just pull the plug now and say Western Days in October, we don't think things are going to be better when we get to the end of September. We don't think it's going to be safe to have the event. We just want to cut our losses, lose the 31 or recover 31,000, lose 120,000 and not lose anything else. We want to hear from you about minimum health protocols. If any of those protocols bother you, if any of them are ones that you think are a really bad idea, here's the time to speak up. Same with those potential Western Days budget cuts. If we have the event and it's in person, for any of those budget cuts we listed, ones that you just could not live with. And then finally, other identified options. One is delay the decision as long as we can, knowing that the cost goes up, or spend the next couple of weeks really delving into the online option and see if it's something we can make happen. And that is as quickly as I can go through some very bulky slides.
So Mayor, Council, we need your direction.
Well, I'll jump in first. Listening to the options to try to keep people separated when they have beer and other things just sounds like, it's just not going to work. And until James brought up the online portion of it, I'm leaning toward not doing it. It's just, the CDC is saying we don't need to have large groups. I've been saying from the beginning, we need to listen to the professionals. But with the online option, that allows us to actually have the event. I think we probably should explore that option, and maybe we can have some iteration of the Oktoberfest doing the same thing and broadcast it out. But I would lean toward the online option. I guess he has to check with the sponsors and see how they feel about that as well, just to keep people safe. Because that's the most important thing. We got to keep people safe, and we don't want to be ground zero for another spread.
Julie, could you tell me who's squared? Just be the next one in line going around.
Okay, sure. Council or Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I had looked through all of James's material. I didn't have the PowerPoint, but before the meeting, and given this a lot of thought. And prior to this, and I came in the door saying cancel, and I'm still there. I think the first thing that I put down in my notes, can y'all hear me? I keep hearing sound.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. The first thing I wrote in my notes is that just looking at the timeline so far this year, COVID hits the US in January. February, we start to get concerned. March, we're hunkered down. April, we're hunkered down. May, we start opening up. June, we're opened up. Then June, we hit phase 2, and then we're July, and we're back hunkered down. So you look at this timeline, and it runs 4 to 5 months. And right now, we're 2.5 months, maybe not quite 3, to Western Days, which really compresses that first timeline into a lot less space, yet we're seeing positive percentage of positives go up. We're seeing hospital go up. We're seeing morbidity go up. And the latest is concerns about what the 4th of July is predicted to do as far as the increase to add on top of all that. And so I look at the timeline and I go, you know what, it's end of September. I think it's just going to be pretty scary right then. I don't see this. It's going to take a miracle that isn't going to happen to put us in a better situation than the previous timeline put us in over the length of time that it took, if you follow my comments. As far as the economic impact, I mean, if we did it, I don't think we can expect to draw the usual 30,000 and 2 million. It's going to be scaled down. I think there's a negative associated with doing a scale down for first-time attendees that was mentioned as one of the primary reasons people come back, is that they've come before. If you're here for the first time and you're left with the impression that this is kind of a dud, I don't know that you're going to come back, and I'm not sure I want to leave that impression. Online, I don't know. I don't know that I'm ready to answer that one. I can't get that excited about online. I'm trying to picture myself spending all day, 2 days watching it on my, computer, and I'll be honest, I don't think I would be doing that. So, but that's just me. And then finally, one last thought. Normally we just accept the fact that weather's a risk. We've had torrential rainouts. We've had some scary rainouts where the old 97 didn't take the stage, or old 90 or whatever they're called, didn't take the stage. We've had our share of weather events, but we've accepted that that's just one of those risks. But if you've got all these other risks piled on and you're trying to figure out all these, maybe we can do this, maybe we can do that, maybe we can do the other, then I come back and go, well, don't forget, weather is also a factor too. And in this circumstance, and now I think it starts to weigh in. So that's at least my 2 cents for the moment. And if I think of something else, I'll shout later.
Okay.
So I'm for canceling.
Okay.
Mayor, thank you. I'm going to keep this real simple. I think if we move forward, it smacks of do as I say, not as I do. I can't put us in that position. Our number one goal is health and safety of our community, and so I'm good with event cancellation. The online stuff sounds interesting. I mean, if we've already got a sunk cost there and they allow for that, then sure, that'll be fun. Might be a way for us to at least get a little something out of a sunk cost with the band and still support the arts. But that's where I am.
Okay, who do we have left?
Kristen, Councilmember Green.
Okay, Councilmember Green.
I mean, I agree with everything that's that has been said so far. What I keep coming back to is just the impact to the local businesses. They've already been hit so hard with the pandemic itself. And so when I think about canceling Western Days, my first pushback is just, what's that going to do to the businesses? Because we do, I know that that's a big impact to their businesses on an annual basis. But then I start to think about, we know we can't have the crowd that we would normally have. And would, as Neil suggested, if we scaled it back to a point where some people came maybe for the first time and they didn't have that great of experience because it was so scaled back, is that going to hurt? Is that going to hurt our businesses in Old Town as well? And are we going to be able to safely accommodate enough people that it's going to be a safe environment for them and their employees to work? And also, it just is, are there going to be enough people, we're going to get enough people here to actually make it worth it to put themselves and their employees at risk? And I'm not sure that I don't feel comfortable that we can do that with everything that we're working against. I agree with Brandon that the online sounds appealing, because if we do have costs sunk into specific acts, performances, that would be a way to get something for the money that we have already spent and can't get back. And also help out, some people who have not been able to work. So I like that idea too, and providing that experience at least for people to watch online. But again, it doesn't really do anything for the businesses. I don't know if we could find a way to make it do something for the businesses. I don't know. But I mean, with all of that said, I guess I feel like the best thing would probably be to cancel the event.
Okay, thank you. Well, now, city manager, what about the parades? How are those going to fit in there? There's either 2 or 3 of them in the fall.
So Mayor and Council, we think the parade is really a difficult issue related to protection of the public. And the way people line up for a parade, we just don't see any way to do it. James had already cut the parade and the cattle drive and everything out of the budget.
Okay. I didn't get all of that, but are we talking about the Western Days parade and we have Louisville High School parade? If they want to have one, they can do that.
Well,
and then the holiday at the hall, or whatever we're calling that, the parade there. What about those?
So can the rest of the council hear me? Yes, no?
Yes. I'm a little low, Donna.
Okay, I'm getting closer. So what we've specifically discussed is the Western Day Parade. James brought up the whole stroll is a question. I mean, it's December, it's just shortly after Rocktober. So in a lot of ways, I think what you do for Western Days and Rocktober is going to impact the stroll. Maybe there's some ways to do it safely. I think parades are a very, very, very difficult activity to pull off safely. So the high school, we would just have to have discussions with them. They had not called us about their homecoming parade. We would have to have those discussions. But again, I think they're veer on the side of caution. Depending on even how they return and if there is a football season, and there's just all kinds of questions at this point in time. So as James said, he's reached out to the Main and Mill folks to talk a little bit about the stroll, and we should have more detailed conversations with them. They really want to do an event, and I get that. But again, from the city perspective, we have to be able to do it safely. So I would say parades are extremely questionable.
Okay. TJ, do you have something else?
Mayor, we also need to let Mayor Pro Tem Schroeder hasn't spoken yet.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, everything that has been said, I pretty much agree with. I really hate to cancel the Western Days event, but with the way the numbers are going right now, and as Councilman Ferguson pointed out, the history of the numbers and how things have been going, I think the prudent thing is probably to cancel. I would be interested in pursuing the idea of online, see what could be done online. At least it would keep the idea in front of the citizens. But at this point, with the way things are going, basically canceling the in-person Western Days.
So Mayor and Council, what I'm hearing is that we will cancel Western Days, we will cancel the Rocktober event, but we will begin working on a virtual Western Days. We'll be back at least next meeting or the next with a proposal. We will probably reach out to Main and Mill and have conversations with them about how we might be able to generate some business through this virtual type program. But we think maybe the next meeting or even the next, we'll be able to bring back a report. James has started some work on that already. So I do think it has some possibilities. And then with the stroll, we'll begin to have also conversations with Main and Mill about different possibilities there. But staff is in agreement with your direction. I'm sorry.
Okay, going back to the parades. If two of the parades are held in September, is that correct?
Homecoming parade's in October. They already gave us the date.
Okay, let's just say they're done in, anything done in September. I don't have a problem with canceling those right now. We're talking about 90 days and that September's gone. So if we could just take that piece of it. And all the other things we're talking about would be completed within the 90 days except the October deal. Is that correct?
It would start 90 days from tomorrow.
Right.
It would start, yes, but that would mainly be in October.
Right.
Okay. So, and we were talking about doing away with that one just because it's tied in with all the other stuff. And the way it's looking right now, I don't think we're going to be able to do any of this stuff and be saying that we can have a safe deal. Unlike a lot of some cities are saying now that everything's wonderful and we're just going to stick our head in a bucket of sand and move on down the road. It's not working that way right now, in my opinion. And if it gets down to me being the tie vote, it's going to be a difficult decision for anybody anyway today. So I would say that we throw at least anything that's going to occur in September or was planned to for this year, lump that in with these other events that we're talking about not doing, and we can get that off the table right now.
Mayor and Council, the other thing for you to consider, and the city attorney may want to chime in here, while the governor's order does give the mayor the right to approve an event, under the governor's orders now, you'd have to do that.
That make me a governor?
Sir?
No answer. No answer. Okay.
Yeah, the mayor has the right to move forward with an event, even under the governor's 10 person limit right now. But one thing we're concerned about is if the mayor approves one event, how does he not approve all events? So just know for the public that's listening that we believe that under the governor's order now, that makes all events questionable, and the mayor would have to be very cautious about approving any events.
As of right now, through the end of September, I can't see that happening with my signature.
So
we do have a speaker from someone from the public that would like to speak also.
Yes, go call him.
Okay, Dana Stinson, if you'll please state your name and address for the record.
What was the name again?
Danor Stenson, we've unmuted you. If you'd like to speak, you may. Are they still, they're still muted. Sorry,
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, Dana Stinson, 7550 Lake Ridge Road, Flower Mound, Texas. Former resident of Louisville, co-founder with Kim Cloud of Cloud9 Charities, the best little brew fest in Texas. Most of you, many of you have been around. We've been around 8 years, and 7 of those years in downtown Louisville. I wanted to report and give some relief to the hotel tax that last year, through the great support of the city of Louisville, the city staff, police officers, Donna Barron, James Kunke, and especially Darren Watkins, we were able to fully go into full steam with our program, Bedtime Rescue. 100% of our profits from Best Little Brew Fest go into Bedtime Rescue. Last year in 2019, we spent over $14,000 in 2 motels in Louisville. We currently work with 4 motels. 2 of those, the other 2 are in Sanger and Denton. As of May, end of May this year, we have spent over $11,000 in a Motel 6 in the Econo Lodge in Louisville. We primarily house homeless women and their children. We get reports from school counselors, police officers finding people sleeping in their cars, etc. And then we put them up for a week or 2. It's a temporary to get them off the street and in a safe place accommodation, but hopefully that helps them get their feet on the ground and get back into an apartment or a home. That's a little bit of background about Cloud9 Charities and what Kim and I have been doing for the last 8 years. I wanted to say that there's one very important variable that has been left out of this equation, and that is a vaccine. I unfortunately in 2009 encountered H1N1, the swine flu. I was very sick. Took me about 2 weeks to recover. So I'm familiar with how these things work. We've all probably had the flu at some point. But a vaccine has not yet been discovered for this particular illness. And it took 6 months in 2009. It started in April, and 6 months later, vaccines were already out on the market in the United States. So I know that we're approaching our 4th month or so with this, and vaccines are being talked about. The trials have already begun with some experimentation. I heard today one experiment is going to 4,000 people to help figure out how to stop this virus. So I know that needs to be taken into consideration. It's a little late now that you've all more or less voted, but Best Little Brew Fest 2020, we've been coming up with our own measures, how to do this festival. It's a tasting event if you have not been to it. So we would choose to use single-serve disposable cups, tent distancing, hand sanitizer, and social distancing in our VIP and so forth. Again, it's not a 100% foolproof plan, but it is taking some necessary measures that we hope we don't have to use in October. So our event is 3 weeks after Western Days, October the 17th this year, the 3rd Saturday of October. We have also discussed going virtual with the festival, with our festival. And what I wanted to say, we've come up with some good ideas for that. And to support local businesses, I appreciate what Councilwoman Green had to say about supporting businesses. And I can talk further about that, but I won't go into it right now. I wanted to say that we need your support. The city of Louisville has been gracious and supportive in many ways, but also in donating a cash of $20,000 for our event, with many other ways they support us. We're putting most of our money back into hotels, and 2 specifically in Louisville. Kim and I believe strongly in what we're trying to do with this charity, and we definitely need your support. Even if we go virtual, there will be financial needs to raise money to keep our charity up and running. So I just kind of wanted to mention that, and I appreciate your time. Thank you for your consideration and giving me some time to speak. Thank you.
Okay, we're talking about this event would be sometime in October, or is it going to be moved to later in the year?
Well,
21.
Well, we've also looked at that, at possibly postponing till maybe springtime.
What I was discussing, that everything I'm talking about is through the end of September, and yes. I'm not going any further than that right now.
Okay.
And Aaron, we can't even talk about this item about his event, because the way the item is listed, it says the city's 2020 fall winter special event.
Okay. My point was that what I discussed, although that was okay, wasn't it? About just being in September, and anything else I'm going to take off the table right now for myself. So, but we do need to consider that sometime in the future. But right now, I'd like this just to discuss the anything up through the end of September. Do I have a motion from anyone about this?
Mayor, the one request that staff would have is that you actually also throw October into that consideration. We're seeing that as a package.
So I move to instruct the staff to cancel Western Days and the Rocktober concert series.
What about the parades?
Well, they're not listed here on the agenda. So unless it's part of the Western Days parade that you're talking about, it's not included in the agenda.
Could you make the motion just to apply to city events?
Well, the agenda spells out Western Days and Rocktober concerts.
Is the Western
You can make a motion for whatever you want.
Is the Western Days a part, is the parade for Western Day, is that part of Western Days?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that parade
So that
is part.
takes care of that one, doesn't it?
Yes.
In my mind it does, it's a simple one. And then the other one would be a City of Louisville, Louisville ISD parade, correct?
But that's not
Yes,
on
sir.
there.
Really,
It would be another
Western Day.
entity.
That's not us.
Right. That
Well,
makes-
the mayor would still have to approve it.
You can cancel it. You don't need us for that.
Yep.
I can't even understand half what's being said, I'm sorry.
So that you can cancel that if your decision. is
Okay,
to do
that's
that.
what I thought, that's where we're at right now. With the
Yeah.
Western Day, anything associated with Western Days, Neil, is that where you're at on your motion?
And my motion stated and the Rocktober concert series.
Okay,
It's exactly what it says in the agenda.
good.
Second.
Did you get a second? on that?
Yes, sir. TJ said.
Okay, are we ready to take a vote? Okay, is there any discussion on this? Anybody? Okay.
Quick,
Do I have a
quick
motion?
question.
Do I have a motion and a second?
Quick question on that, Mayor. Is staff still under the impression to move forward with potential online version of Western Days?
Yes, sir. We would bring that back to you at a later meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's the question. I can get to my mute button.
Okay. Secondary issue? Okay. Okay, we have the motion and a second on the table. Does everybody understand that? Okay. City Secretary, call the vote.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson made the motion. Councilmember Gilmore seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Mayor, those were all aye votes.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you all very much for this. This is a tough deal, and it's going to be lots of people not happy about it, but I don't see that we have any other choice. So, thank you all. Ready to go to number 13?
Agenda item 13, discussion and consideration of appointment process to various city boards, commissions, committees. On June 30th, various terms of office on the city's boards, commissions, and committees will expire. City Council will need to identify interview teams and determine which team will interview which board, commission, or committee. The recommendation is that the City Council proceed with the appointment process. Mayor, would you like me to read the teams and assignments?
Yes, please do that again.
Mayor Durham and Councilperson Gilmore, Park Board, Library Board, Community Development Block Grant Advisory Committee, and the Louisville 2025 Advisory Board. Councilperson Jones and Councilperson Green, Animal Services Advisory Board, Zoning Board of Adjustment, Old Town Design Review Committee, Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Number 1 Board of Directors, and Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone Number 2 Board of Directors. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer and Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson, Arts Advisory Board, Planning and Zoning Commission, Louisville Parks and Library Development Corporation, Louisville Housing Finance Corporation, and the Oil and Gas Advisory Board.
Okay, and do we have a recommended date to get this back to you?
Appointments probably should be made at the July 20th meeting.
Okay, for the 20th.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Everybody hear that? To have this to be appointed by the 20th. Okay. Okay. City Secretary, call vote.
We just need a motion to proceed as read to you all.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson made the motion. Councilmember Jones seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Mayor, those are all aye votes, and I will email you all the assignments tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you. Item 14.
Consideration of an ordinance amending Article 6, Chapter 16, Utilities of the Louisville City Code by deleting Division 4 billing procedures in its entirety and in its place inserting a new Division 4. On March 20th, 2020, the City Council suspended enforcement of Section 16-327, discontinuation for non-payment, to provide relief to residents that were negatively impacted by COVID-19. In order to provide relief from having to pay the full amount in arrears or face disconnection once the suspension of enforcement is lifted, staff recommends a change to the City Code to allow for payment plans. Sections of the City Code related to the utility disconnect process, tampering fee schedule, and transfer of unpaid accounts will also be amended through enactment of this ordinance. The recommendation is that the City Council approve the ordinance as set forth in the caption.
Okay. We put a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I have a question for the city manager. Are you there?
I am.
So my understanding in reading this is that you will come back and tell us what the structure of payment plan or plans will be. Is that correct?
No, the ordinance actually lays that out. So it lays it out that the payment plans have to be over a 6-month period.
No, well, I saw that. I read the ordinance, but it doesn't say what, how that's being offered for payback. What's the structure? Is it even payments of the arrears across the 6 months? Is it, what are we, how is it being done?
Yeah, so they would have to pay their current bill, and then we would take the bills that are outstanding, divide it by 6, and it'd be flat payment.
Okay, are you adding that amount onto each month then? That's what I'm getting at.
Yes, yeah, because you're gonna have to pay your current bill plus that installment.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. And so reading the ordinance, that detail wasn't clear to me. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Counselor?
This is an ordinance of the Louisville City Council amending Article 6 Utility Fees, Charges, Rates, and Billing Procedure, Chapter 16 Utilities of the Louisville City Code by deleting Division 4 billing procedure in its entirety and in its place inserting a new Division 4, amending the process and eligibility for partial payments and extensions of service, amending the process preceding the disconnection of service, clarifying the tampering fee schedule, and amending the transfer of unpaid accounts, providing for repeal or severability and an effective date, and declaring an emergency.
Okay, City Secretary, call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Troyer made the motion. Councilmember Green seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Mayor, they were all aye votes.
Okay, thank you. Now down to item 15.
Consideration of a resolution extending the declaration of local disaster for public health emergency signed by Mayor Rudy Durham on March 13th, 2020 until 11:59 p.m. on July 20th, 2020, and amending the period of suspension of the enforcement of Section 16-327 of the City Code, discontinuation for non-payment to terminate on July 20th, 2020. Ongoing evaluation of circumstances related to COVID-19 and the updated recommendations of the CDC and the Texas Department of State Health Services indicate that the conditions necessitating the disaster declaration have and will continue to exist for a period extending beyond July 6, 2020. Furthermore, the City Council suspended certain utility disconnections for non-payment for the term of the disaster declaration. The availability of utility payment assistance made possible through CARES Act funding, as well as the development of a plan to allow past due amounts to be repaid in up to 6 installment payments, makes reinstatement of the disconnect program feasible. The recommendation is that the City Council consider the resolution as set forth in the caption.
Okay. First of all, is there any discussion? Okay. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. City Secretary, call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Troyer made the motion. Councilmember Jones seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
Mayor, they were all aye votes.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for that. Now we're down to reports. First item is report on COVID-19. City Manager?
We just have a couple of facility updates. Sun Valley Pool, because of the increase in positive tests, as of July 2nd, we did suspend open swim reservations at Sun Valley Pool. We are still continuing. People can reserve a lap lane, and some of the programming is continued, but the open swim has been suspended. We have closed the senior center as of July 6th. At Leela, there will be no access to the river on weekends to reduce overcrowding, and the library continues in a come and go phase, and that come and go phase means people have to set an appointment to come in and use the computers. I'm told at this point we've never had all of the appointments used, so that seems to be working quite well. But those are the major changes we've made since our last meeting in relation to city facilities.
Okay. City Manager, do you have any idea of how many swim lessons have been given this year and how they relate to what's happened in the past?
No, sir, I don't, but I think Stacy is on the phone perhaps, and she might can answer that question.
I don't think she's a presenter.
Yeah, there she is.
Swim lessons are down. We just started registration for them recently, and we're going to start in July, but they're down simply because of we're requiring parents to be in the pool with the student to be that close contact, and it's just a different way to learn how to swim. And so we've had very little response to it. I don't know the exact numbers, but I can get a report out to you.
That's okay. Thank you very much. We just need to do as much as we can to assist.
Yes,
thank you.
Stacy Mayer has continued her camps or day camps. Stacy, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So we're offering day camp out at Lake Park at Connor Pavilion. We've had anywhere from 10 to 16 kids in camp, depending on the week. They are outside the entire time, but in the shade under the pavilion. They go fishing and hiking through the park, and they've kayaked a couple of times. So we have a small but steady group coming in, and we're practicing all social distancing protocols. Parents drop off their children for camp, and everybody in the car, including the camper and the driver and other passengers, are temped before the camper can come into camp that day. So it's been a pretty good experience for us out there, considering.
Thank you.
You have anything else, City Manager?
No, sir. Don't
Okay. We'll now go down to staff. Is there any staff reports? Anybody?
No, sir.
Okay. Now we'll go down to the city council reports. We'll start with Councilmember Green.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Councilmember Jones.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I want to speak for a second on some letters that I received and probably some other people received last week. They're pretty much form letters asking us not to make masks mandatory but voluntary. So after I got the third or fourth one, I decided, let me read this letter to see what's in there. And I clicked on the links to see where the links went. And we're living in a time now where, and I said this before, that we need to get out of opinions. We need to stop listening to Facebook experts. And the links that these people gave were from February, March. And as we all know, a lot of things have changed since February and March. What the CDC knows has changed since February and March. And as of the last few weeks, things have changed. The World Health Organization has changed. And so I want to respond to these citizens and say, I understand your frustration. We all hate these masks. They look horrible, you know, although some people can wear them better than others. But it's a necessary device that we have. We're not stopping the spread of COVID. We're trying to run out the clock. We're trying to keep other people healthy and prevent ourselves from being spreaders and prevent being spread to us. So I would encourage those folks, go to the CDC website, read up on the mask. They just updated it, I believe, a few weeks ago. So we need to get out of the opinion business and listen to the scientists. Go to the Denton County Public Health website. Go to the CDC. Go to the World Health Organization. Stop going to Facebook and stop looking for confirming your bias with what you want to hear. We're all in this together. We all have to help each other out, and we have to get out of this opinion game. I don't care what your politics are. COVID doesn't care either. Let's be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones. Councilmember Gilmore.
Mayor, nothing. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. City Manager, do you want to add anything else? She's left the room. Okay. I can see her back there.
No, sir, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember, I can see you there, Neil. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, unplanned comment, Councilman Jones, spot on. Plus, I'd add this: when somebody sends me a form letter and I figure the maximum amount of time they spent was to copy, paste, and put their email address on it, that's about the amount of time I tend to spend paying attention to it. You want to send me a message, send me a message. You want to copy something that somebody else wrote? Wow, I'm not impressed. I'm sorry. And I'm particularly not impressed with cherry-picked facts. But meanwhile, so thank you, Councilman Jones. Meanwhile, MCL Grand, I guess we're going to see if this happens. Sonny Sweeney concert presented by City of Louisville, rescheduled for July 18th, 2020. I guess we'll find out. Acoustic jam sessions. I guess we'll see what happens with that. Keep Louisville Beautiful Garden Secrets class I mentioned before has been canceled. It's the one for June 25th is canceled, and this is still on my list here, but I suppose we'll hear back from them when they don't cancel them. And so you're left with, for sure, at least if you want, go see Color Dance presented by the Visual Arts League, which is up at the Louisville, at the MCL Grand. You can go see that exhibit. Just wear your mask. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say I was privileged this week to experience the day camp at the Connor Pavilion. Privileged to read the mayor's proclamation of July as being Parks and Rec Month. The the kids were having a good time. There was one little boy that was a little bit frustrated with what he was doing, so he was sort of throwing a fit for a little while, but they settled down and they seemed to be having a real good time. So I applaud the staff, and thank you, Stacy, for allowing me to do that.
Okay, thank you. Now we're down to closed session.
Closed session. In accordance with Texas Government Code Subchapter D, there'll be no items that need to be discussed under Section 551.071, consultation with attorney, pending litigation. Section 551.072, real estate, property acquisition. Section 551.087, economic development, deliberation regarding economic development negotiations. Section 551.074, personnel, discussion of election of mayor pro tem and deputy mayor pro tem.
Okay, we'll now go into closed session. We're back into open session. Any action to be taken?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we nominate Councilmember Arnir Ferguson to be Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Kristen Green to be Deputy Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
Good. Motion and a second. Are there any other motions? Okay. Call the vote.
Show that Councilmember Gilmore made the motion, Councilmember Jones seconded the motion. Mayor Pro Tem Troyer.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Green.
Aye.
So all aye votes, Mayor.
Congratulations on the new members and the old member too, so thank you. Any other action?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second to adjourn. Call the roll.
Councilmember Ferguson, Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson made the motion. Councilmember Jones seconded the motion. Councilmember Troyer.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ferguson.
Aye.
Councilmember Gilmore.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Pro Tem Green.
Aye.
All aye votes, Mayor.
Okay, congratulations, everybody. Thanks.
Good night, y'all.
All right. Good night.
And we'll see y'all whenever.